Straight from the man cave, Kinnick Under the Kitchen. Authentic, original player artwork is being drawn up for Hawkeye fans everywhere. Locally made prints of stars wearing the black and gold from the past, present, and future. How about current Hawkeye superstars Cooper DeJean and Torrey Taylor? Legends of the past like Jack Campbell, Spencer Lee, and Tim Dwight. Plus future phenoms like Aaron Graves. There are so many options available. They make great gifts, and your purchase benefits the Hawkeye athletes wearing the black and gold. Visit Under the Kitchen on Facebook or at Under the Kitchen's new website. That's underthekitchen.square.site. Again, that's underthekitchen.square.site. Check out Under the Kitchen today and get your authentic, original Hawkeye print. Well, good evening to Hawkeye Nation. It's about 8:40 p.m. Central Time here in the great state of Iowa, and I am pleased to be joined by two legends in their respective careers. We'll start out with the GOAT of Western Illinois, former Iowa offensive coordinator, Don Patterson, who's with us throughout the year. And Don, whenever I get a special opportunity to have you late in the month of January, I view that, just as I just said, a very special opportunity. So thank you for joining us for an off-season show. And I look forward to this. I think it's going to be a fun show, a participated show. We've got about 300 people already here, 4 minutes in. So I think people are driving, geared up to talk about this subject. And someone who's going to help us discuss the subject and how we got to this point. HawkeyeReport.com's own Tom Kert is with us as well.
Hey, Tom.
Good evening.
Guys. Don, did you apply for the offensive coordinator job?
I think you know better than that, Tom. I don't think Kirk wants to hire anybody that's older than he is.
Let me just make very clear to everybody that just heard that Don absolutely could still get the job done.
Well,
I will say that.
You're very kind of free. I honestly feel like I haven't lost a step, but
it's like calling a game plan or calling a game is like a painter. You know, it's like watching Picasso work. That's the way Don was back in the day, right? You were
Picasso. It's like riding a bicycle. You never forget.
Well, I was just, it's funny. I was talking to Chuck Long the other day, and he's going to be the full offensive coordinator for the Arlington Renegades this year because Jonathan Hayes is now the athletic director at Cincinnati Moeller High School, so he cannot get away to do his side hustle of calling games and now the United Football League. So Chuck was trying to get back into that mode of riding that bike again, Don.
Don is frozen at the worst time.
Yep.
That is good to hear for Chuck. Is he enjoying that, Tom? He must be.
Yeah, he's going to be headed down there, I think, shortly. They've got to get ramped up because they'll be starting up here pretty soon. So, I think they're pretty excited about getting going with defending. I guess they're technically defending their title, even though it's a different league, because they did win the championship last year. So, they did do that.
Would Chuck's head coach by any chance be named Stoops?
Yes, the head coach is one Bobby Stoops. So
those guys are together all over again. Good for them.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's start this out. This is going to be as fresh and straight to the point as I've ever started this show out. We've gotten here where it's January 29th. Hawkeye fans have been waiting for what, 8+ weeks, Tom, for this announcement as other coordinator jobs had been filled and head coaches named. Iowa fans were getting antsy, and it's been a little bit of a journey to get here. Of course, we know the storylines with Coach Brian Ferentz being relieved of his duties, not officially until the end of the year, but it was announced during the season. And since then, the question has been, who would Kirk Ferentz bring in as the next offensive coordinator? And we have an answer to that question finally. Former Western Michigan head coach Tim LESTER will be Iowa's offensive coordinator. For the record, Iowa has not officially announced this through the athletic department yet, but we anticipate. Tom, is it safe to say that there's some fine knit details to finish out here, but this is a safe bet to say that this is secure. This is locked in.
They wouldn't have leaked it out that it was happening if they weren't confident that it was happening. But it's a paperwork thing. It's dotting I's, crossing T's, and it's a process with the university side of things. So yeah, that's what they're doing, is they're finishing up the paperwork, and then they'll make an announcement, and then they'll schedule a press conference. And I told you earlier, Corey, I guess maybe next week. Maybe they'll have it by the end of this week, but early next week, middle of next week. I don't know that there's any rush, to do it. I don't know what the rush would be, other than to calm the nerves of anxious fans who want to hear from Tim Lester and Kirk Ferentz. And by the way, we haven't talked to Kirk since Kaden Proctor committed too. So that's another thing to talk to him about. But anyway, yeah. So this process has been interesting. Go ahead, Corey. It looks like you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
No, I wanted to address something. Late last week,
Yep.
I had been given some intel from somebody that has been a reliable source to me in the past regarding various Iowa football notes and subjects, that this individual gave strong indicators to me that Kevin Johns would be the next offensive coordinator. And I did not publish that for the world to hear, but I did share that with some of the premium members on our channel, and was later told, I think it's financial holdup, why we haven't heard anything on Saturday. And then on Sunday, there was even more hubbub that perhaps that wasn't happening, and eventually Tim Lester was hired. You were not on that same train, Tom, and I think you're going to. No. Before we get to that, I want to make something very clear, and my big thing on this show is to be transparent. I have said this a number of times before. I am not an insider. All right, that's one of the reasons why I love having Tom on here, because this is what Tom does for a living. Once in a while, somebody will reach out to me and say, "Hey, I've got this scoop, or I've got this on this subject," and I'm happy to relay that. But it sounds like the information I was given was not correct, was not accurate. So, Tom, what holes can you fill for us and for the listeners out there that maybe have gotten some information that was not totally accurate, either from this channel or from other sources? Because I know we're not the only platform that reported that Johns was expected to be the OC. So what can you tell us? Yeah, and I only knew what you said because people brought it up on the message boards, and so that's when I reached out to you today, and I was like, hey, it was Tim Lester pretty much from the get-go. Even Friday, it was, Kevin Johns was on campus and visiting, and we saw the photo and everything, but it was always still Tim Lester's job to lose, and that was the case Friday night. That was the case Saturday. It got even more confident, and then Sunday we got the kind of informal announcement or leaking of the fact that it was going to be Tim Lester. So I think I don't even know exactly when he visited. It must have been sometime early or middle of last week. And he just seemed to hit it off with Kirk, from what I understand. And just kind of, you have a feel for somebody when you meet them, and and you sit down with them, and there's a comfort there. And as a head coach, you got to be comfortable with your offensive coordinator, and you got to be comfortable with them personally and professionally. And I'm sure Kevin Johns was a terrific guy, but at the end of the day, you got to go with your gut feel. And that's what Kirk did, that he just felt more comfortable with Tim Lester. And so that was that. So it was interesting because, they were, Luke Getsy's name came up during the week, former Bears offensive coordinator, and he had spent time at Green Bay. I think Kirk's maybe got something for Green Bay people. Joe Philbin had been there, and his name had come up. Luke Getsy had been there before he was with the Bears. He was the quarterback coach, and
did some work with the offense there. Interesting thing about Tim Lester is his backup quarterback early on in his career was a guy named Matt LaFleur, and that's probably why he got that job up in Green Bay fairly easily, and the kind of this gap year that he's had. So, I think there's, I understand people were frustrated with the process. I understand that people were frustrated, had kind of fallen for Kevin Johns, but the more you dig in, I'm going to be patient with Tim Lester and see what he has to say and what Kirk has to say before I'm going to judge, and then I'm going to see what they do on the field during spring ball and then into the fall before I, push eject on the guy. I'm going to give him a chance to see what he can do.
I made the comment earlier today to someone, and this individual reached out to me and basically labeled what I had said to be reckless and irresponsible as it relates to the report on Kevin Johns. That's fine. For the record, I have no problem admitting that the information I was given was wrong.
Hey, Corey, we all get crap wrong all the time. I mean, I'm wrong all the time too. I mean, it just happens.
No problem at all. Take a slice of humble pie when I need it. But I'll say this. I remain skeptical, and I've expressed this to Don privately. I still remain skeptical based on what I don't know. And I hear some people in the chat like Gary, and I see Don is in the chat, says that, hopefully Don Patterson can shed some light on this. Kelvin says Patterson knows how good this guy is. Don, I know you made it an appearance on a different show earlier today, so you've been thinking about this at length for the last 24 to 36 hours. We'll come back to Tom, but Don, What can you share with us as it relates to the career of Tim Lester? And I know there's a connection between his former head coach at Syracuse, Scott Schaefer, and yourself.
Yes. When I realized that it appeared that Tim might be our guy, I immediately thought of Scott Schaefer. Scott and I have known each other a long, long time. I came within a hair of making him our first defensive coordinator at Western Illinois. I've known him since my last years at Iowa, and I knew him as an outstanding coach. I've said to any number of people, he's one of the best defensive back coaches I've ever known. I would realizing Bill Brazier was retired at that point in time, I told Scott that I felt that he was on par with Bobby Elliott, and Bobby Elliott was one of the best. So he was an outstanding coach even back then. He reminded me that we had won our first game when I was at Western by beating Northern Illinois, his team. And he still was amazed that I had the nerve to call a reverse when the game was on the line from the 5-yard line, but it worked. So sometimes the best calls are unlikely calls. We won't have to get into that, but I've known Scott a long time, outstanding coach. I followed his career when he went to Syracuse, of course. I kept track of him. And I was disappointed when Syracuse eventually let Scott go. I hated to see that. So the first thing I did when I realized Tim was in the mix is call Scott. I talked to him this morning, and I didn't miss any bones about it. I said, I need some kind of confirmation that Tim is a good hire. And he said, I can assure you, he's one of the finest coaches I've ever known. That's why I hired him to begin with, to join us at Syracuse. And he said, here's what your fans don't know. Our last year, when we had a 4-8 season, that last year we played our 5th-team quarterback for a good percentage of that season because the 4 that were listed ahead of him on the depth chart all were injured. And he was a walk-on, and we had to play him because somebody's got to take snaps. And if you go back and look at the scores, I said this morning on the air with Pat, I said, Pat, I think if you go back and look, their problems were more on defense than offense. And he did look, and he said, you're right. Even though Tim's record as OC was 5-14, there were any number of games where they scored 21, 28, or 35 points and lost. So the truth is they still moved the ball even with the 5th-team quarterback. That sounds vaguely familiar to my story about us moving the ball with the fifth team quarterback back in '94. Remind listeners, we had 400 yards plus offense that season, even with the fifth team quarterback. It can be done. You need to do a great job of getting the ball to your game breakers. And we had some game breakers, even if we were down to the fifth quarterback. So we didn't have a great season because we were not a great team on defense that year. And a little bit like Syracuse, we still moved the ball, and yet we still lost games at times. So anyway, long story short, Scott was able to verify, great person. He has a wonderful family. I have great respect for him, always have. That's why I hired him to be our offensive coordinator. And that just came from him this morning. So he said, we lost, and I got fired, and no one was retained. We lost not because of Tim Lester. We lost in spite of Tim Lester. And I thought that was good to hear. And I did ask Scott, I said, there's no way I would use your name on the air without your permission. And he said, you can absolutely use my name because I'm here to tell you that Tim Lester is a great hire. So I was glad to hear that. That's someone that worked with him for many years, and someone that he trusted to run their offense at Syracuse.
One of the things with the Syracuse situation too is Tim came in in 2014 in the middle of the year to take over as the OC, and it was a mess. And I know there's been like some stories that people have pulled up. Well, they weren't the cadence or something, or they just there was no. And I'm like, the explanation was the offensive line was so beat up and bad, and they were just trying to get a snap off, so it wouldn't be. I mean, you got to understand the circumstances. And that next year, they improved offensively by 10 points per game. So was it great? Probably not. I mean, but it was still 25 from 15 is better. I think most people would, given what we saw last year, where Iowa ends up at 15.4. If you get that magical 25 points per game, people are going to be okay with that, I would think. So, and looking at his numbers at Western, it cratered that last year. I think he got hit by a lot of portal guys, lost his best receiver, lost his quarterback, just had a lot of things hit the fan. And then you've got, as Don will tell you, sometimes in college coaching, when they change the boss, that's a troublesome thing for a head coach, because the boss, the new AD that comes in, what do they want to do, Don? Find their own guy. I'm going to put my own stamp on things.
ADs have this idea that they make their name by who they hire. So if they didn't hire you, they're trying to figure out a way to get rid of you so they can make a hire.
Yep. So that's what happened to him. That's why he got, because the other years, in the COVID year, you throw that one out a little bit. It was all MAC schools and they averaged 41 a game. But those other years, it was 32, 33 points a game when Tim Lester was essentially calling the offense and getting things going. So, I mean, there's some positives there. Yeah, it's Western Michigan. We get it. It's a MAC school. It's different than Power 5 football. But I like the fact that he's a quarterback. And Don, you can speak to that more than I can, but I just think a quarterback, it's good to have an OC who's a quarterback and is going to be in that room and knows what they're going to do, because I think quarterback development is one area where Iowa has been lacking the last few years.
Yes.
I agree. Which gives me a great opportunity to bring up another name that's an old friend of mine. I talked to the associate AD at the University of Houston today, because back when Tim was a player, he was an associate AD at Western Michigan. Incidentally, he used to be a manager for Iowa football many, many years ago. His name is Monty Porter. And when I talked to Monty this morning also, I said, Monty, you've told me what you know about Tim. Would you be comfortable with me using your name in regarding to Tim? And he said, absolutely, I would. He said, I remember Tim as a freshman at Western Michigan. And he said, I had so much admiration for him because he was out there playing as a true freshman, and he just got the crap beat out of him, but he still hung in there and kept playing. Let me give you an idea of the numbers over his 4 years. He never redshirted. He was the co-freshman of the year in that 96 season. Over his 4 years, he threw for 11,299 yards, 87 touchdowns, 17 school records. So it's safe to say he had a pretty productive 4 years. I don't know what the record is at Iowa, but I believe it's something less than 11,000 yards. That's a lot of yardage. And Monty knew him as a young player and then as an older player. Incidentally, coming out of high school, he had every intention to commit to Steve Spurrier at Florida. And as a senior at Wheaton Warrenville South, he tore up his knee in the playoffs at the end of his senior year. And all of a sudden, that scholarship offer went away. That's how he ended up at Western Michigan.
Yep.
So I give him a lot of credit for dealing with adversity, even as a high school senior, and still making the most of a difficult situation, because Florida wasn't interested in signing a quarterback that just blew out his knee.
First of all, I do want to take a moment to thank Jennifer for becoming a premium subscriber here. Thank you, Jennifer, and appreciate everybody that's hopped on board as a premium subscriber here on YouTube, and a few extra perks come with that. Erica is one of our premium subscribers, and she threw in a super chat here, so thank you, Erica. Can Lester be effective at this level? I believe most of experience is in the MAC. We kind of already addressed this. This comment was about 2 or 3 minutes ago, and I think you just hit on that, Tom. But I think that is to kind of placate some of the fans' concerns. I understand when you look at just the resume on paper and you see where when you're comparing Kevin Johns, who was a reported finalist, with Tim Lester, you're saying, okay, Tim Lester coached at Syracuse for a couple of years as the offensive coordinator. He was at Western Michigan as a head coach. Last year was really bad. Numbers perspective, wins and losses perspective, they weren't great. Wins-loss perspective at Syracuse. But I think what Don and Tom just added was some context to the career of Lester and maybe some things that were happening during that time period. And I think some context that's fair to point out about Kevin Johns, and I pointed it out during a podcast late last week when the Kevin Johns rumors were swirling, is that I had some concern. It wasn't like I was just heavy on board the Kevin Johns train myself. I had some concerns about Kevin Johns because, you know, he had a resume that would give you an indicator that, hey, he probably learned from some really good offensive minds like a Kevin Wilson, like a Cliff Kingsbury. But the experience that he had at Indiana, the experience he had at Texas Tech, how much of that game planning and play calling was Kevin Johns, and how much was it, the more experienced Cliff Kingsbury or Kevin Wilson? Of course, he had experience at Duke, had some experience at Western Michigan. But again, I think that's maybe the divide that fans have when they see experience and they see Kevin Johns with that offensive coordinator title at some high Power Fives, and the only offensive coordinator experience that Tim Lester brings is a couple of years at Syracuse.
Don, I want to ask you this because I'm curious about this question, because you sat in both chairs. You sat in the OC chair and you sat in the head coach chair. Is it helpful as a head coach? Is it helpful to have a guy on your staff who's a coordinator but had been a head coach? Is there a benefit to that maybe the average fan doesn't see?
A limited benefit, I would say.
Okay.
You know, at least if the OC has an appreciation for the dilemmas of being a head coach, I think that's helpful.
Yeah.
You know, he's got an idea of the way the head coach is probably thinking, because he's worn those shoes. Uh-huh. So I think it does give him a little bit of insight into how to deal with the head coach, realizing he's been a head coach himself. Yes.
So I watched some Western Michigan film, and it seems like they run a lot of 11 personnel. That's not a major personnel for Kirk Ferentz. I know you chart all that and everything. Is that the RPO game is more part of what he did? Is that kind of something that you can meld into what he has done with what Kirk has done? Yeah,
I couldn't help but notice some of the video I saw was 12 personnel.
Yeah,
a lot of the RPO stuff was 12 personnel also.
Yep.
I think it's safe to say there's no way Kirk would have hired him if he didn't have a good background with both 11 and 12 personnel. And I think RPOs can help us, incidentally. And those that may not really understand RPOs, it's for a run-pass option. That's what it stands for. And in some cases, a quarterback might be taught if you have an isolated one situation outside versus certain receivers, it doesn't matter what play we call. I want you to throw the ball out there. And of course, he knows whether it's going to be a stop route or an out route. But we're just talking about getting the ball out in space when there's room to operate out there. So if the matchup is good, a quarterback would be looking each and every snap with all the RPO plays to take that throw that was there, free access as we call it. In other words, I know for sure he's one-on-one. The coverage is off coverage, and it's simply a matter of playing catch with that receiver. And then there are other RPO throws where the quarterback might be reading a linebacker, and when he carries out the play action fake, he simply reads the linebacker. If the linebacker inserts into the line of scrimmage, he pulls the ball, throws the ball over the linebacker, typically to an inside receiver such as a tight end. So that's just a little background in RPO. It can be a lot of different things. It might be a bubble screen that's part of the RPO. But if you like the numbers outside, you throw the bubble rather than run the ball. And typically you'd expect some of that on early downs, of course, whether it be first down or maybe 2nd and 5, 2nd and 6, 2nd and 7, up to the quarterback's discretion as to whether to run the ball or throw it. The linemen don't need to know because they're simply blocking the run.
Is there any concern? I'm going to go back to the hire for a second, Don, because I see several people commenting on this in the chat. Bob says, I can't get past the fact that Lester was heading to Troy before we scooped him. So the average fan would look at that and say, well, why wasn't he on the radars of bigger schools? Do we expect this to just be a diamond in the rough type of hire?
I'll tell you what, it's a good thing that we didn't have YouTube and internet chats and message boards and everything when Kirk Ferentz was hired, because imagine what it would have looked like. And when Bob Stoops is announced at Oklahoma, and then Kirk Ferentz, and then that's the first year and a half of Kirk Ferentz was not good.
Correct.
It was not good at all. I think
Tom,
those people. If there would have been betting odds after going into his second Big Ten season, I don't think many people would have thought he would have lasted through his third season at Iowa.
What I thought you were going to do, Tom, is talk about 1981.
Yeah. Okay. There's a good one too.
I should say December or January of 81, December of 80. Anyway, a guy named, those old time fans will remember this. A guy named Clovis Hill was our offensive line coach in year 1 and year 2. Clovis went back to Texas Tech. We're looking for a line coach, and Coach Fry did say, I'm probably going to go to the NFL ranks to hire a guy that I know a lot about. He turns around and hires a guy that was 20-something years old that no one had ever heard of. But Coach Fry is smart like a fox. He also knew that Kirk Ferentz learned from Joe Moore. And Joe Moore was one of the finest line coaches that ever coached college football. Matter of fact, the award's named in his honor, right? The Joe Moore Award.
Joe Moore Award.
So Kirk was put to the test. Hayden checked him out. Hayden realized this guy's young. He wasn't even a lineman. He played at UConn, but he knows offensive line play inside and out. And he knew that because he'd been mentored by Joe Moore. And the rest of the story, of course, is that young guy that nobody knew anything about was a guy named Kirk Ferentz. And it turned out he had a lot to do with us going to the Rose Bowl in that very first season for Kirk of 1981.
Yeah.
DC Hawkeye, appreciate the super chat. Is it possible Johns becomes the receivers coach, Tom?
No, I think it's going to be John Budmeyer.
Okay, now that's not going to make a lot of people happy.
No, I think that will probably put more folks on the edge. But I saw the guy with the comment towards me about it being a ho hum hire, and that I play it safe. So anyway, that's okay. Everybody's got an opinion.
Yep, and that's what we're just reacting here. Don, give me your reaction to what Tom just said, that he believes that John Budmeyer will be the receivers coach.
I'll be honest, that concerns me, because I'd like to think if you played wide receiver, you have a little better idea of how to coach wide receiver. Just as if you played quarterback, I think that's an advantage for you in becoming a quarterback coach. Obviously, the expert see it this way: if you play a specific position, you're best equipped to become an expert at that position. So I don't know anything about John in terms of being a receiver coach. I don't know if he ever has been. I would admit, I coach quarterbacks and receivers, and I never played receiver because I was always playing quarterback. But I do think that I learned a lot from Bill Snyder and Hayden Fry, and by the time I became the quarterback receiver coach, I did know what I was doing at both spots. That's as honest as I could be. I just hope we consider all options. I know we've had some good receivers here that have gone on to actually coach receiver, even if it's maybe at a lower level, like Co-College, I think, to name one guy that comes to mind. Yeah. That I think had a great playing career here. That doesn't mean he's not more qualified than John to be the receiver coach, but it would certainly beg the question, is it possible that he's the ideal hire because he, after all, also played here at Iowa and did have a great playing career. And having said that, there are all kinds of receiver coaches right now, I think, that are out there that would love to be considered to be the receiver coach at Iowa. I know some people might argue, do you think people wanting to come are that high on Iowa? And I would simply say, if it's been a difficult job in the past, that's a way for you to make your name as a receiver coach, to come in here and make the results entirely different than what they've been. That's what a receiver coach with confidence would say. Yes, I'd embrace that opportunity because I know exactly how to coach receiver play.
And also those the receiver coach or any coach at University of Iowa, that check has crooked numbers and zeros behind it, more than when Don was the OC, right, Don?
Yeah, exactly.
Those checks are a little bit bigger these days. That's another attractive thing too.
You're right. I know a lot of people were concerned. Are you telling me that there's no established offensive coordinator out there that we couldn't raid from another school? And I don't know who was available and who wasn't. I would say this: if we're in position to pay a receiver coach more than what he's making somewhere else, then I would think he would think seriously about, even if he is Power 5, let's face it, all Power 5 schools do not have the capacity to pay as well as we do. So I don't know who.
I'm going to be curious what Tim Lester's salary is, because Phil got a nice bump, and the going rate for a coordinator in the Big Ten is over $1 million now. I mean, Brian's salary was fairly inexpensive, but I think most salaries you're going to see in the Big Ten are 1.5 for coordinators now, which is insane to me. But so it's the price of doing business these days.
So, I guess
I want to ask this question because I did look this up before going live here. Based on what I researched, John Budmeyer has never coached receivers. He is a former quarterback. Yeah. He's a quarterback's coach. We know he's been on staff as an analyst for Iowa. And it's obvious that Kirk Ferentz really likes John Budmeyer. I think that's pretty clear. And it's obvious that Keith McNamara really likes John Budmeyer. But I would be curious from your perspective, Tom, because you're the individual that just said you think this is what's going to happen. Explain that to fans that would say why. Why John Budmeyer to coach receivers?
Well, I think it's a level of comfort that Kirk has with him as a coach. And I think he feels like he's maybe got a rapport with some of the players. They respect him. They like him. That's the assumption I'm going to make and I just think Kirk has a great affection for him and thinks he's a good coach. So I think that's probably what it comes down to. And, you look at tight end coach Abdul Hodge was a linebacker and really never coached on that side of the ball. And, he's turned out to be a pretty solid coach for tight ends. So I think maybe they feel like he can just go in there and learn it and and develop there. Like Tim Polasek back in the day. Tim Polasek was not an O-line coach, but he came in and learned how to be an O-line coach. Now it helps that you had an OC and a head coach who are O-line coaches by trade.
Right.
That is certainly a real benefit. But I'd be curious to find out where John Budmeyer is going to learn kind of tricks of the trade, or who he's going to lean on to help him develop as a wide receivers coach.
Right.
And I mean, all I would echo from my perspective, if anybody cares what my perspective on that is I'm with you, Don. I have concern there. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't want him to fail. I'm just saying I'm concerned about that. And Kelton Copeland's a former quarterback, but he had wide receiver coaching experience prior to coming to Iowa. It appears that John Budmeyer has not had that. And that is a position where Iowa, Tom, you follow recruiting more than Don or I do. That is a position they've struggled to recruit at. And I can't imagine that John Budmeyer is going to be attracting great receivers and overcoming that stigma.
Yeah. The biggest thing that's going to help Iowa attract receivers is a better offense that throws the ball to the wide receivers and gets the ball in their hands and lets them make plays. And if they can do that, that makes you interesting to recruits, because right now it's hard. It's a hard sell because they don't throw the ball a lot and they don't throw the ball out to the receivers. So I'm pretty sure this is still true. I didn't look at I know they sent out the final stat book today, but I think Eric All finished the year as the leading yardage receiver for Iowa, which is wild to think about.
Yeah. Oh my. So thank you, DC Hawkeye, for the super chat. Lomansky adding a super chat in. He says, this hiring made possible by Beth. Hope we remember that Corey, Don, or Tom, the fan base has seen zero scoring against top-level Big Ten teams. Your feeling about the overall fan base move. Tom, do you have a feeling you're engaged on social media? It's
the thing I always have to say is my window into the fan world is the most passionate portion of the Iowa fan base, the online version, not the average fan. But I did get some texts in the last 24 hours from different people that were like, who? They were just like, explain this to me. And and I get it. I get why people would be skeptical. I do. I understand it. And I think Iowa's offense is in kind of a Missourian mode. Fans are going to have it shown to them that the offense is better. I don't think here's the good part. I don't think the offense can get worse. I just don't think that's possible. So
let me say this real quick, Tom. I have expressed some degree of concern, not just with Budmeyer coaching receivers. I think there's a legitimate concern there. But as it relates to LESTER, I had some initial concern yesterday after having discussions with Don and then, the first part of the show. I feel better about this hire already, but I'm going to remain skeptical. I just am, because we have seen the last two offensive coordinators that were hired here have not really produced very good results. So, I mean, I understand that not every hire is going to be a slam dunk, but and I get it. I mean, Kirk has had success hiring assistants. You bring up Norm Parker in '99, and bringing in Seth Wallace and obviously Phil Parker, go down the list. But there have also been, offensive coordinator hires that have not worked out. So I think fans need to feel okay with remaining skeptical and recognizing the fact that, hey, we've seen an offense over these past 3 years that has been as bad as we've ever seen it. And
it got worse. It got worse.
But listen, there is no reason not to be giving Tim Lester an opportunity. And he is absolutely, in my opinion, absolutely an upgrade over Brian Ferentz. With all due respect to Brian, but Tom hit the nail on the head. He's a former quarterback. He has play calling experience. He has coached offenses. He's played, again, as a quarterback and at a high major program. He is, in large part, the opposite of what Iowa had as it relates to experience with Brian Ferentz back in 2017. So there is reason to be positive there.
Hey, Don, I've got a question for you because I want to look to spring football. Cade McNamara probably not going to be healthy enough to do a whole lot of anything because he's coming off the ACL. How big of a hindrance is that when you're installing a new offense, when you're the quarterback that's going to be running that offense is probably going to just be doing mental reps more than anything else?
Well, with all the experience that Cade has, I don't see that as being a huge factor. We do talk about mental reps. If you're not the one that's getting the physical reps, you've got to be standing behind the quarterback, of course, and envisioning you in his shoes so that you can learn even if you're not taking live snaps. So Cade will be good at learning the offense regardless of whether he participates or not. I don't have any extreme concerns about that. And I say that because even if he's not available for spring, I would imagine he'll be close to 100% healthy for the summer months. And then, of course, after June and July comes camp in August. And by the time September rolls around, he should have at least 3 good months of work with the receivers over that summertime.
Okay, we're going to open the phone lines. We're going to try to keep things somewhat concise. We've got nearly 700 people watching live right now.
Wow.
Appreciate everybody being here. It's great to be able to have this crowd.
What's the record for it? What's the record?
I think post-game shows, Don, we've been up over 1,200 before a couple of times, right? Or at least
I'm not sure. I'm just aware of the total number of hits.
I bet it's after a loss. They show up after a loss, right?
Yeah, usually.
I think the biggest crowds, honestly, was 2 years ago from Michigan and this year from Michigan. And also Penn State, I think. People want answers.
Yeah.
And it was difficult to give them a lot of answers over what we just seen, but that's what they want. I understand their concern.
People call it therapy, Tom. So
yes, it is.
This is therapy at times. Let's go ahead and go to our phone line is open, 515-635-1601. We've also got our StreamYard line. The link is in the description of the show. Again, we're going to keep calls relatively short this evening. If you have a question for myself, Tom, or Don, please make that clear at the outset, and we'll get to your question. But again, if I cut you short, just know that we've got a lot of people wanting to throw in their 2 cents in the chat and over the phone line. So let's start with Tyler, who's been on hold since the beginning. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you guys doing today?
Doing good, Tyler. How are you?
Good. I'm probably one of the ones that's in the camp of concerned about the hire, definitely.
Okay. Tell us why.
More of the lack of the Power 5 experience, and when he was in Power 5, his time at Syracuse. I mean, you can say that Syracuse wasn't a very good team, and he took over halfway through the season, but he coached there the next season, and the offense didn't get that much better than it was the first season. And when he was at the MAC, he was playing against the worst defenses in the country. He was playing against MAC defenses, and that year were terrible. So it does make me rather apprehensive about the hire, definitely.
Hey Tyler, they did go up from 15 points a game to 25 at Syracuse.
Yeah, but they were still like the 119th ranked in the country, weren't they?
Certainly, but yeah. I mean,
they played their 15th quarter. They went through 5 quarterbacks that year and still had respectable numbers.
And for anybody that says they're going up, no, I'm not ripping you, Tyler, but let me just defend Tim for a second. For anybody that says, well, you're going up against MAC defenses, he's also going up against those MAC defenses with MAC offensive players, with MAC level talent. Like, it's kind of an unfair statement to make, I think.
Yeah, and I think he is good at recruiting underdeveloped or diamonds in the rough players or wide receivers specifically. Like Sky Moore was a 3-star that he found. So I think he does have the ability to find underutilized talent, but I think that Kevin Johns can do that, and he has a refreshing, modern-aged scheme to go along with finding diamonds in the rough or using players that are not very good. I mean, he was the OC at Duke. So I think a lot of the fans, the most part is just that we had Kevin Johns on the table and we went with Tim Lester. I don't think most people are against Tim Lester. It's just the fact that Kevin Johns was on the table and we let him leave. That's the problem.
Well, I appreciate your insight, Tyler. Do appreciate the phone call. And I understand where Tyler's coming from because, as Tom said earlier, this is the day and age of social media. This hire 20 years ago, people would have never known that Kevin Johns, or probably, I guess we knew that Bob Stoops was involved, right? And we found out later that Don, you were involved, and the guy from UNI was involved. But we understand. Yeah, exactly. But this is a new age where reports swirl and you're going to hear different things. I don't know. Is that Kirk's fault? I think it's. Can I just say something? And I'm not ripping on the reporter who tweeted it out because I know he didn't take the picture. I think it's ridiculous that somebody's taking a picture of Kirk Ferentz with Kevin Johns outside of a cafe or whatever that was. I think that's kind of ridiculous.
No, I thought it was. I jokingly said it was like a smoke screen. It was to get us off the scent of where this was really going. Can I answer South Bend Hawkeye's question? Because he says he's a defensive analyst. What he was doing was analyzing the offenses of the teams that Green Bay was playing and presenting those to the Green Bay defense.
Correct.
So he was analyzing offense. He was studying offenses of other teams in the NFL that Green Bay was playing on a weekly basis, not a defensive analyst. So let's be clear what his job was, and research that a little bit.
Yep. And you can hear there are videos and interviews with Tim Lester where he talks about that. I believe when maybe I can link this in the description later, but when Tim was initially hired by Green Bay, I believe it was a news station back around
Michigan and Kalamazoo. Yeah.
That interviewed him, and he talks about it. And it is an insightful interview. So I'd encourage you to search that. Just search Tim Lester, probably Tim Lester coaching, Tim Lester Packers, and you'll find that interview. It is insightful. And Don, you had something to say to add to what Tyler brought up about the Syracuse situation. You already went through what you went through, but do you have a response to those concerns that Tyler brought up about the struggling offense?
Well, the head coach himself today said, I lost my job not because of Tim Lester. I lost it in spite of Tim Lester. Tim did his job, even though it was a 15 quarterback, he still did the best he could in very difficult circumstance. For those that are hung up about numbers, let me throw this number out. He coached 1 year after the Syracuse firing of the staff. Next year, he's quarterback coach at Purdue. Maybe our listeners would feel better if they knew Purdue averaged 295 yards a game passing that year. Yeah. 295 yards a game passing. The head coach was fired anyway because they couldn't stop anybody on defense. And he was not retained by Jeff Brom. But that's no surprise to me. I wouldn't expect that Jeff Brom would keep him because Jeff Brom wants to hire people that he knows. And, of course, he's an expert on offensive football anyway.
Yeah. He's a quarterback by trade, Jeff Brom. So,
Correct.
He was.
But for the record, when he was coaching the quarterbacks, David Blum was the quarterback, and he threw for 295 yards a game. So if you want pass offense, well, that's a good example of pass offense, 295 yards. But one thing that Scott Schaefer said, which I was glad to hear, he said, I'll promise you this, Don. For sure, Tim understands the value of running the football. He recognizes you got to have balance in your offense. So he is committed to showing good balance. And, of course, that's one thing I'm sure that Kirk did want to know is you understand the value of running the ball. They have that in common, and they should, because the best coaches understand that you need balance within your offense.
Let's go back to our call line. Thank you for calling Hawkeye Hangout with Coach John Patterson, who's on the line.
That you need balance within your offense.
Hello, you're on the air.
Hey, I was calling about this is Randy Hanson and Tyler, and I think you guys got can you hear me?
We got you, Randy.
Okay. I've been watching your show, and I mean, I think, and I appreciate both Patterson and your other guests, because we're getting a lot of good insight on Tim Lester. And I think a lot of the angst is nobody knew this guy. His name never surfaced. I've always kind of been a Joe Philbin guy. I kind of look at it probably from Corey's perspective. I feel a little bit better hearing all the things that Coach Patterson put out. I'm a little, it's kind of, wait to show me. But the most informed opinion or enlightenment came from Coach Patterson tonight. He got on the phone and talked to people that knew. But anyways, the only thing that I can say, because I am a hardcore Hawkeye fan and Packer fan, and you don't get into the Green Bay Packer organization unless you are like meticulously organized and know what you're doing. Matt LaFleur, nobody knew who he was, never even hardly heard of him, and all of a sudden he's a Green Bay Packer coach. And I mean, I was like, holy cow, we had all these people to pick from. But when we, to be an analyst for the Packers on their offense, studying defenses or, all this, you don't get on Matt LaFleur's staff unless you know exactly what you're doing and you are meticulously organized. And so I think anything that give everybody a little bit of confidence to go along with what Coach Patterson was saying. So I actually, I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. And the last thing I'll say on it is if he does anything with the RPO, there's no chance Deacon Hill will ever see the field, because you can't have a 12-8-40 guy running an RPO. And I'll feel very good about Deacon Hill ever, not being our quarterback ever again. So, but anyways, it's a great show. Appreciate the insight, but I just throw that in on the Packers because I know a little bit about what, I listened to all their shows and podcasts up there. LaFleur is just meticulously organized. And so if Tim Lester was on his staff, he's got a little bit something going for him.
Well, thank you for the call, Randy. And we appreciate your insight, and we're on the same page here. So appreciate the phone call, sir.
All right. Great show.
Thank you, Randy.
Corey, let me make a point about Troy. A lot of people I see are saying we beat Troy on our offensive coordinator. I said, you think back, Corey, I said a while back in time, knowing that we play Troy next fall, I said we should not sleep on Troy, because Troy is one of those teams that is better than their name. I promise you.
They are.
It's a good thing that their coach got a different job, because I might have been
all of a sudden, they're not such a formidable team if they have coaching changes.
Yeah.
All right. A couple things here. Erica with a super chat. Coach, can you please be our wide receivers coach instead of Bud? Thank you for that, Erica. And Chris, did the new OC have authority to hire his own assistants? If not, that was a big reason Chris said no. ? Not too appealing. Be so strong-wined. And then he asked, different super chat. He says it's no surprise we couldn't get an appealing candidate when they're constrained from day one. I mean, I'm guessing that is it pretty safe to say of John Budmeyer as the wide receivers coach, Tom, that was not Tim Lester's decision?
That was probably not Tim Lester's decision. He probably met him on a visit.
Yeah.
I would guess. Talked to him and got to know him. He may have known him. They're probably recruiting the same areas. I would guess Bud recruited the Chicago area. I'm guessing Tim Lester was in the Chicago area a lot, recruiting players. So maybe they knew each other, bumped into each other at schools or whatever. But I doubt that they know each other really well. And guess what? I know people are talking about constraint. Yeah, Kirk has his fingers in the offensive side of the ball, but I think just about every coach has kind of a, Don, when you were a head coach, you had your fingers in there, right?
Well, there were times when I did tell our coaches, I'd get their input, and there were times when they offered me some input that I really didn't care to hear. And at those times, I might remind them, no offense to you guys, but I was coaching before you were born. So excuse me if I go my own direction. I've gathered your information, and now I'm going to do otherwise because we made that same mistake 15 years ago. That's why we're not going to follow up on your recommendation. There were times when I had to say that. And I said it in a nice way, but they still got the message. There's something to be said for experience, and certainly Kirk Ferentz has a world of experience.
Experience and being the boss.
Yeah.
But to be clear, Don, you've made this statement on the show in the past. Kirk is not a play caller and has never claimed to be a play caller. And you don't believe, Don, that he's in there meddling and, calling plays on game day. Obviously, on a big third down or a fourth down, I mean, he may say, okay, we're going for this or we're running or we're throwing. But Don, in general, Brian has been calling the plays.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Kirk gives a framework, is what I always say. He kind of gives you a framework of what he would like done. And
yeah, the play caller wants you to know. That's why a good head coach, even on third down, he'll simply state before the third down call, you got 4 downs. Meaning we're going to go for it on fourth down. If you want to take a shot, feel free to do it because we're going to go on fourth down anyway.
Don, you'd like to be Dan Campbell's OC, right?
Oh, my goodness.
Every time.
No, I knew that 4th and 3. I'm like, no way. You better kick this.
Don, I said the same thing. You're up 14 points, and you had San Francisco just respond with a field goal. You kick the field goal, get it back to 17. Those are the types of decisions where I guarantee you Kirk Ferentz is sitting back with his feet on the ottoman saying, this is why I do what I do. I mean, that only reinforces the Kirk Ferentz way, does it not?
Well, you've heard me refer to the number 17 as the magic number. That requires 3 scores. Yep. So with a chance to go 17, you do it, especially 4th and 3. 4th and 1, that's different. 4th and 3, 3 yards is a long way. 9 feet's a long way to make it sometimes. And sure enough, they fail.
But that's just what he does. That's just what Dan Campbell does. It's incredible. But it came back. I mean, that was
it served him well. It has until Sunday. Until Sunday.
Well, I give their quarterback a lot of credit. He made a lot of key throws on 4th and 3 for first downs over the course of the season. He did, but not that time.
Yeah.
You notice they didn't try to run for it. They threw for it.
They lived and died, as we say in basketball, you live and die by the 3. They lived and died by the risky critical down decisions by Dan Campbell. Yeah. So, unfortunately, against the Niners, they died by it. Brian with the super chat. Thank you, Brian. Has anyone heard about an official announcement date? Do you think they're just waiting until the wide receiver coach spot is filled? Tom, do you think they're waiting for that?
No, I think they're probably just waiting to get all the paperwork done, and then they'll probably have a press conference maybe next week. Maybe they'll do it by the end of the week. I'm not sure, but it's the hire's done. It's paperwork at this point. It's bureaucracy.
It's bureaucracy. This is a question for apparently all 3 of us. T. Hink says, which quarterback would be best for Lester's style of the pistol formation with the RPO? Don, let's start with you on that.
Well, long term, I would prefer number 11 because number 11 can extend plays. Let's talk for a minute about how important it is to extend plays. You saw it last night with San Francisco. And Purdy is not supposed to be Mahomes or the guy from the Ravens. But Purdy did a nice job of demonstrating, here's what we mean when we talk about extending plays. Key first downs that he ran for. Yep. Even though he's not supposed to be a great runner, he still got it done, and he's smart enough to avoid the hard hit too. He still found a way to get on the ground.
Tom, a lot of people were really impressed with Marco's ability to run late in that game against Tennessee, but it's been said that he has struggled with the arm since he got here. He has not gone through a spring practice. How important, Tom, do you see this upcoming spring practice, especially with this new OC for Marco Lainez?
Oh, yeah, and I'm on the record as saying that I would give Marco the lion's share of the 1 reps in spring because we know what we have in Deacon. Okay, you know what's there, and yeah, you could justify giving him some 1 reps with a new OC because maybe that'll be different for him. I'll concede that, but I want to see what Marco can do because if you're going to default back to Deacon as your backup because you don't like what Marco's able to give you in the spring, you need to get in the portal in the spring and find yourself a backup quarterback because Caden McNamara has played a grand total of 7 games in the last 2 seasons.
Right.
He's been hurt. He's had knee surgeries the last 2 years after game 3 at Michigan and then game 4 at Iowa. So they have to solve the backup quarterback thing, because you can't come into next year with a banged up, or a guy who's been banged up a lot in Caden McNamara, and then Deacon Hill as your backup, because you saw what that looked like last year. And Tim Lester is going to be calling plays with one hand behind his back if that's the answer. I mean, it's going to be if he's going to think he's back at Syracuse with the 5th string quarterback.
We also haven't proven that we're great at protecting quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So that's why a mobile quarterback certainly gives us an additional advantage.
And I think to piggyback on that, I'm a big advocate for Marco Lainez, but at the same time, they're bringing in an intriguing prospect in James Reesar. And I know
I'm just not sure he's ready to help him.
No, I just think long term, if you look at Reesar and Lainez, those are a couple pieces to work with if you're Tim Lester.
Sure, 100%. But I think, and I heard, and I think it was Pete Thamel from ESPN say something about that. He sees all these quarterbacks kind of gathering. Like you look at Ohio State's quarterback room. Somebody's leaving that quarterback room at spring. They got like 5 studs, 2 5-star kids that just came in there. Somebody's exiting that place. There's going to be different situations where quarterbacks are just like, I want to go somebody that I can play. So, I think that's something maybe they have to look at. But here's the other side of the coin. Iowa's at 92 scholarships. They've got to get down to 85 by August 1st or whenever practice starts. So they've got that, and you've got the smaller window. Guys have to go in the portal. April 15th to the 30th is when the portal window is open. So you're going to have to clear some space to get a quarterback in. So that's the dance that you got to – it's a weird dance that coaches have to do right now, with managing rosters and with the COVID year guys. And you love getting all those guys back, Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson and Quinn Schulte and Jamari, Sebastian Castro, getting all those guys back is awesome, but it also eats up a scholarship. And, Kyler Fisher is another one on scholarship coming back. So they've got all those guys back. That's great. The defense is going to be awesome, but you've also got needs elsewhere too. And you got the scholarship bind that you're in right now that's going to have to be sorted out during spring ball.
South Bend Hawkeye wants to know in the chat. I'm not going to put his comment up in the screen, but he wants to know if Tom is just saying what he said about Bud Meyer to get a rise out of Hawkeye fans.
I didn't know what did I say about Bud Meyer?
Just that you expect him to be the next wide receiver.
Yeah, I'm just being honest. I'm just doing my job. I'm just.
Yeah.
I don't want to. Trust me. I know that it's not gonna be a popular thing. I just like Tim Lester. I'm just being honest that he's probably gonna. I didn't say it was a great hire. I just said that's who I'm probably gonna be.
I'm just curious. I had a brief conversation with Marvin, and I need to get in touch with him to get him on the show. But talk to him at the Big Ten Championship game, Tom. Marvin McNutt's in Eastern Iowa. Has he coached at all since he walked away from his?
I think Don brought him up earlier. Well, not mentioning his name, that he had helped out at College.
That's right. Okay, you did mention that.
Yeah. He didn't say him. He didn't say who it was, but I knew who it was, Coach. I knew who it was.
Yep.
So I wonder what the if there's been a thought of that from Kirk's side in all this.
Hey, DJ K's in coaching right now too.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to laugh. Let's So a couple things here before we head to a break. Katie is here with Super Chat. Thank you, Katie. She says there's a reason they are called head coaches. Okay. I don't know where that fit into the conversation. We appreciate the Super Chat, Katie, and very much appreciated. I don't know if I'm missing something for you, Tom. I figured we could address anything else. I guess there is a question that this is a good one for you. Could this be Kirk's last year? This is from Fisherman in the chat.
I thought about that when you saw Pete Carroll leave and you saw Nick Saban leave. You just saw all those guys that are kind of in his, I want to say peer group, age group. you start thinking about that I always use the analogy of where is he at on the back nine of his coaching career on the golf course. Is he on the 17th tee box, 18th fairway? I don't know. He's closer to the end than I think we realize. I think he'll probably be like Nick Saban, where you get into your early 70s and you're like, it's probably time. It's probably time. So, but the thing with Kirk is Kirk's, I don't think he wants to get into TV like Nick Saban. I think he's going to be around football because he'll probably go work for Game Day or something. I don't know what Kirk's going to do. He doesn't play golf. I don't know if he fishes. So I don't know what he's going to do other than the honeydew list that Mary gives him every day. Maybe, I guess that would be what he does.
Maybe he's going to coach just to avoid that. Is that possible? Just avoid the honeydew list.
Hey, some people might say that the best way to keep your marriage happy is to not spend time together, right?
That was part of our success. Is I was at the
I knew Coach would get a chuckle out of that one because I'm
what
sure
do they say?
that
Absence makes the heart grow fonder, right?
Right?
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, Tom, it's been anything we missed. I mean, we've had you on for the better part of the last hour, and
No.
we're going to continue with Coach Patterson for maybe another hour. But is there anything that we didn't cover that you think is notable for Hawkeye Nation to know right now? I think there's reason to at least there's absolutely reason to give this hire an opportunity, even though maybe the initial feeling with fans is kind of skeptical.
I understand the skepticism. I really do, and I appreciate it. So I get it. I get that Kirk is conservative. I see that comment there about Kirk being conservative. And that's just who he is. But it's served him well over the past 25 plus years as a head coach. That this style has worked for him. Will it always work? I don't know. I'm just interested to listen to what they have to say when they have the press conference. If there's some nugget there from Tim Lester that says Kirk's going to kind of give me a little bit more of a runway here to do some things and run a different style of offense, and maybe they'll have more RPO than Iowa has traditionally had in the past. And if they can do that, then maybe there's something to work with here. So I'm going to just kind of, I understand people being skeptical, but I'm just going to kind of listen to what they have to say, watch what they do, watch on the field in the spring. And then, ultimately the judge is going to be the performance on the field in September, October, and November. That's how you're judged, by what you do offensively in those seasons and your win-loss record.
And the question here from Longshot, is there any new info on why we think Paul Chryst turned the job down?
I don't know that he ever got officially offered. We know how that works all the time. It's like you kind of dance with them and are we dating? What are we doing here? So I don't know. I think Paul might have got cold feet maybe. I think maybe that's what it was. Just, hey, he had to move down to Austin, Texas, and Coach, I don't know if you've been down to Austin, but Austin's a great town.
Yes, it is.
It's a good place to live. They got a lot of good barbecue.
Yeah, they're not familiar with the term wind chill either.
And Paul got $11 million on his way out of Madison. So it's not like he has to go run a job. And maybe his goal is, I don't really want to be a coordinator. I'm happy being an analyst, and I'll wait and see if I can get a head coaching job somewhere. And maybe that's his thought. And, that's fine too.
Tom Kert of HawkeyeReport.com. Check out Tom's stuff. Tom, what do you have in the hopper this week? I know we've got men's basketball tomorrow, women's basketball Wednesday. I'm sure you've got more
tomorrow
stuff.
Yeah, I got basketball the next couple of days, so that'll be. And by the way, this weekend there's big junior day for Iowa football too. So they'll have we'll be all over that with trying to figure out who's going to be there. I saw some photos tonight. Kirk, Ferentz, and Abdul Hodge and Tyler Barnes are up in, I think, Clear Lake. They're watching Thomas Meyer, and then they're playing Algona, so it's the Limbaugh kid and the quarterback up there. So they were there, and Matt Campbell and his staff were there too. So both staffs were staffing that high school basketball game. I think it was in Clear Lake. So good times.
Check out Tom's stuff at HawkeyeReport.com and follow him at Hawkeye Report on Twitter, as they say now, X. Tom, always a pleasure to have you on, and we'll keep getting you back for basketball, and we'll stay in touch. Appreciate your insight as always.
Absolutely. Coach, have a good night. Corey, thanks for having me on.
Thank you, sir.
Always a pleasure, Tom.
So again, check out Tom's stuff, HawkeyeReport.com. Before we get to our next segment here, I want to take a moment to thank Iowa Floor Covering down in Bondurant. Tile showers, carpet, and more. Whatever flooring needs you have, call Tyler, Ryan, and the guys down in Bondurant and see how they can help you with your next flooring project. Or if you're a contractor, maybe a DIYer, I know there's a lot of people who are into DIY stuff. Iowa Floor Covering may be the perfect destination for you and your DIY needs. Give them a call, 515-379-7000 for all of your flooring needs. You can also visit them online at iowafloorcovering.com. If you're interested in their Tough Core Click Together 4.5 millimeter waterproof vinyl flooring, it's available at $269 per square foot. Check out iowafloorcovering.com with the /DIY. Again, that's iowafloorcovering.com, and by phone at 515-379-7000. Iowa Floor Covering down in Bondurant. All right, Don, we have got another caller here that wants to chat with you. Thank you for calling Hawkeye Hangout with Coach Don Patterson. Who's on the line? Lemansky, you're cutting up. Is it Lemansky?
Yes. Talk more clearly into my phone.
I got you now, sir. Good to hear from you.
Well, nice to have you this evening. Just want to say that your efforts are kind of the window into Iowa athletics, and part of my disappointment is the marketing communication from the Iowa program to its fans. I graduated there. I held season tickets with my dad for over 20 years, and for the first time ever, last week, I had a personal phone call from a person, if they do anything, as an Iowa graduate and fan. I also started to get email tickets about Iowa football season tickets because I used to be one. I just want to compliment you on you two for being the voice box to fans about the Iowa program. You keep us out of the ditches, keep us from getting too temperamental. And I called in mainly, Corey, to apologize to you. I'm a premium subscriber, and you or I on a Big Ten call-in show about Kaden Proctor news. And I should have stayed in my lane, and Erica reminded me that, are you sure you should, be given news that Corey gave you as a premium member? And Erica was right. I should stay in my lane. I also want to just make a comment about my question about the Iowa temperament is that I actually looked up to renew my season football tickets because of what Beth did. And after thinking about it and the delay, Friday I decided I was not going to be a season ticket holder. We've got modern television. Sports is less popular overall. Watch the women's program, what they're attaining with their coaching, their decisions, their recruiting. But I don't want people to give up hope. But I just want to apologize to you, Corey, for not respecting your premier membership. I owe you that. And I'm still optimistic. I think 2024 is such a key season for the Iowa fan base. And I work for Bill Krause, and most people know about Bill Krause supporting Iowa athletics. He was a manager for Evashevsky. I worked for the man. I talked to Iowa athletics. We need to protect the legacy. And I just so admire Don being, if anybody's got more invested in this program, it's Don. And I sure admire his level-headedness. Even when he
maybe points out a differences of opinion, which gives him incredible credibility. And Corey, you and I know each other so well. We kind of we have a few laughs back and forth out of good humor. But Nebraska isn't set in steel, and neither is Wisconsin. And no human being likes change. And everybody should read the book "Who Moved My Cheese." Don doesn't like change. Corey probably deals with change better than Don and I. But college athletics move swiftly, and I sure hope that that we can move forward in a positive manner and make the right moves. I like your both comments about Kaden Proctor. I'm kind of maybe too optimistic about the offensive line chemistry being so much better. We can run the ball like the old days. I'd like you to comment on anything you want to, but especially the communication aligned with a top level SEC lineman, what it can do for us, and I'll hang up and listen.
Appreciate the call, Lemansky. Thank you. And no need to apologize. I don't even know what he's really apologizing for. I appreciate Lemansky being a premium member. And anyways, as it relates to Proctor, I made the comment last night when our guy Kyle was chatting with me. He can only block one guy. You've made that comment about Tyler Linderbaum, about Kaden Proctor. So I am not just convinced that all of a sudden this offensive line is going to be dominant again. And he struggled at times at Alabama. I am absolutely impressed that he was able to go to Tuscaloosa and start from day one as a left tackle, a true freshman left tackle, Don. He's a big guy. I don't know if there's any future as far as a move on the interior once he gets to the league, or if you think he's a tackle, a primo tackle at the next level, kind of like Tristan Wirfs is. He's switched over to left tackle now, but just your thoughts on Proctor. I don't know that we've had you on the air since he committed.
Yeah, and Tristan, if I'm not mistaken, as a rookie in the NFL, played right tackle.
Correct.
And now he's a left tackle, right? So he's more seasoned now, and they're more comfortable with him playing on the blind side, as we call it, if you're right-handed, of course. Watching Kaden, I did read somewhere, I believe Kaden even acknowledged that he gave up 12 sacks this year. That's a lot of sacks for one position to give up. And I will admit, I don't know what he weighs right now, but I'm a little concerned about him starting off as a left tackle. Again, because if he's playing right tackle at least, and he struggles with the edge rusher, the quarterback's right-handed, so I'd rather the pass rusher be in his view rather than on the blind side. So we'll see. The best pass protector should be at left tackle, and I'm sure he will be at left tackle. And if that's Richmond, great. And if Proctor's better, then I have no issue with Proctor starting off at left tackle. Maybe he will be the best, but off of his freshman year, it'd be a little bit of a jump to just assume that's the case. Maybe he'll be a better pass protector than Richmond. Maybe not. Maybe it'll be somebody other than either one of them to project at left tackle. But I suspect it'll be one or the other that'll play left tackle.
The real Hayden, talking about Tim Lester, says if he was a football genius, he wouldn't have been heading to Troy, and he wouldn't have been fired by Western Michigan.
If he was a football genius, he wouldn't be available anyway. He'd have a seven-figure job already.
Well, DC Hawkeye, he says, Coach has certainly made me feel a bit better tonight. However, if this was any other top 20 program, your offense was among the worst the last few years, and it takes you 3 months to find a coordinator, an unproven Power 5 coach, they would be fired. The search took longer than a lot of people expected. I think that's part of the buildup here as to why people feel let down to some extent. And I can sympathize. I empathize with that to a large extent because there was talk early in the process that, Kirk is swinging for the fences. But I don't know that, swinging for the fences means that he swung and missed on this. There's different perspectives here. And obviously Kirk has a perspective with this. I'm sure Kirk is. Do you anticipate he's happy with this hire, Don? I mean, it's not like this is the last choice on the table. I think it's clear Tim Lester is someone that Kirk must have really liked during the interview process, heard good things about. I just was saying, Don, it's obvious that Kirk, this is someone that that he was impressed with during the interview process, in addition to the endorsements he probably got from mutual friends or associates. So, I mean, we don't know. This could be a slam dunk hire, similar to Norm Parker in '99. And I hope fans are able to be patient and wait and give this guy a chance, because Tim Lester is not responsible for any of the recent offensive struggles at Iowa. And I think there's still vitriol from a lot of fans who are just so frustrated with the situation. And I also understand, as I said earlier, I understand the frustration from fans who are like, how can I trust Kirk when he enabled the situation with Brian for so long? I get that. I get that questioning. I get that frustration. I get that skepticism. And for people that say, hey, Greg Davis wasn't a good hire, Ken O'Keefe's offense is, for the most part, underachieved. That's all fair criticism, and that's part of my skepticism. But we don't have to be so black and white. That's one of the things that frustrates me so much, not just with society in general today, Don, but so many fans, is that it's black or white. Either we have to just love and worship him and kiss the feet of Kirk Ferentz and Tim Lester, or we have to say he's the worst thing on God's green earth. Why can't we just say, hey, there are some question marks that need to be answered, but they will not be answered until we see things play out here. And none of us were on those interviews. None of us know what Kirk and what Tim Lester know and what Scott Schaefer knows. None of us, not you, not Tom Kert, not any of us. So let's see how it plays out. As long as Kirk Ferentz is in charge of this program as the head coach, I will say this: he has every right to hire who he wants as a coordinator. Okay. It's clear that line has been treaded on lightly with the situation with his son. Tim Lester is not related to Kirk Ferentz. All right. Yeah. So let's just let this play out, and perhaps Kirk will surprise a lot of people. I am more encouraged than I was 24 hours ago as I've learned more about Tim Lester. I did go and listen to Tim Lester speak. I made a comment a few days ago, Don, that I was impressed when I listened to an interview with Kevin Johns. I think either one of these guys would have been a good hire based on what I know.
Right.
The RPO thing is intriguing, Don. How much RPO do you think we see from Iowa once he gets here? Do you think he just completely transitions to a traditional pro style system that we have seen at Iowa?
Well, knowing Kirk very well, I would be shocked if a meeting did not include a session where Kirk simply said to Tim, okay, Tim, you have an awareness. You've done your homework. You have an awareness of where we are on offense right now. I want you to take the next hour and give me some recommendations for how to make this offense better. I have no doubt that happened. And I further have no doubt that Tim Lester had a good response for Kirk's question. Kirk would not have hired him now if he wasn't comfortable with the answers that Tim gave to Kirk and the staff. I would imagine there was an open session where at the bare minimum, the offensive staff was in the room at the same time. Tim was giving ideas for how to make Iowa better. I would be absolutely shocked if that meeting didn't happen much that way. And I would be willing to bet that Tim had a good response for Kirk's question. If Kirk were not comfortable with Tim being able to expand the offense and make us more productive on offense, I believe with all my heart of hearts that he would not have been offered the job. The search would still be on. There's nothing magical about naming a coach by the end of the week. It could very easily happen next week or the week after. And for those that think we're going to run out of candidates, money talks, and we've got money. So if we need to keep searching and hire someone away from where they are, we can certainly get that done too.
Roselle in the chat says, Lester has had his team average 40 points a game one year and top 35 before. Has an OC at Iowa done that in the last 20 years?
Maybe not. I don't know.
That's a good question. And I think we can both agree scoring offense is not the ultimate stat. Is that fair to say, Don? We've talked about the balance when you're evaluating an offensive coordinator's performance, balancing offense versus points per game and points per play and all those numbers.
Well, Kirk talks often about complementary football, and part of what that means to Iowa football is we are going to take steps to protect the ball. We didn't do a great job with turnover margin this year, and of course, a lot of the fault was right there in the lap of our quarterback that played the last half of the season. That was a problem. Part of the problem was with the defense too, because we didn't do a good job of generating turnovers. That's one area where we can improve. And I have no doubt that that will be emphasized. What happened to Iowa always having an edge on turnovers? We didn't have that this year. We played a great defensive game against Michigan, except we never generated a turnover. That's the only way in which we failed that game defensively, because you'd have to take your hat off to what we did in stopping Michigan. But we did not generate turnovers, and that's part of our success routinely anyway, is to have an edge on turnovers.
Mitch B. Corey is still crying and recycling the same ideas.
Mitch, why don't you give us your full name so we can properly identify who has such a bogus thought in their head?
First of all, he didn't spell my name right, so I don't even know who he's talking about. And if his last name is just B, then he's got bigger problems than me crying on the air. So anyways, thanks for watching, Mitch. Always appreciate the kind words. Lemansky, what has to happen to call the 2024 season a success? Corey and Don, your perspectives, please. We'll start with you, Don. What's a successful 2024 season like?
Well, for starters, let's talk about offense. If we can average 25 points a game, I guess you'd have to consider it a successful season, because we didn't come close to that number this year. But the bottom line, I'm still in Kirk's corner. The bottom line, we need to win 7 or 8 games. I think 7 or 8 games at the very least should be our standard. We're not aspiring to win 7 or 8 games. We're aspiring to win them all. That's how we play. But we are realistic enough to know that some of the games on our schedule are going to be a huge challenge. And that's simply because we have some tough opponents that are going to play us next fall. So continue to compete for a championship. Now we no longer have that intermediate goal of winning the West. Now we simply have to be either number 1 or number 2 playing in Indianapolis. Now we're number 1 or 2 out of 18 teams. That's a huge challenge. We don't have to go to Indy every year to be successful. Let's face it. The third place team in the Big Ten is very likely to be among the top 12 also, and very likely to be in the playoffs. So truthfully, you might be better off as the number 3 team, so you don't have to go play in Indy, and you can get yourself well for the playoffs. That's part of the problem going forward. That could happen. You know, you're hoping that you're the 3rd best team in the Big Ten, and you don't have to play an intermediate game before you get to the playoffs. These championship games are not going to mean as much when the playoffs are expanded to 12 teams. So you're going to see players sitting out in championship games because they're in the playoffs anyway. The only question, are they going to be a 5 seed or a 9 seed? That sort of thing. That could happen.
Tyler, appreciate the super chat. Tyler, I don't know if there was supposed to be a comment to go along with this. Let me see if there was. I do not see a comment here from Tyler, and if I missed it, Tyler, I believe there is one here. Here it is. Tyler Gibson, thank you for the super chat, Tyler. Is Drew Tate an option for quarterbacks coach? I think it's pretty obvious Tim Lester is going to be coaching quarterbacks, Don.
Right, and Tim Lester, I would say, is more qualified than Drew Tate.
Absolutely. Well, let me say 100%. 100%. Again, I am skeptical, like other people are, but absolutely. And I'll say it, like I said it earlier to our friend Mitch. I'll recycle an idea again for him. Absolutely an upgrade from Brian as it relates to the passing offense. Like the experience he brings at quarterback, coaching quarterbacks, calling plays. There's not even a comparison as it relates to upgrading at that position, right? So any disappointment that fans should be feeling, you can feel that way, but please keep it in perspective relative to what you maybe thought were possibilities, whether those were realistic. Like the Paul Chryst thing that's fair. If you're looking at the Paul Chryst situation and saying, hey, we were really close to hiring Paul Chryst, didn't get it done, or hey, I think they should have went with Kevin Johns, they passed up on him. I'm fine with having that conversation. You have every right to have that opinion. It may not be as informed as it maybe could be, but it's fine to be skeptical. But like in comparison to what we've seen here of late, as it relates to experience play calling, experience quarterback development, etc., I don't think there's any question. This is Tim Lester is going to be a huge upgrade on several counts. Tyler, different Tyler, says, can we get your guys' take on as the wide receivers coach? I think we kind of addressed this earlier, Don, but What is it? Just come down to the fact that John Budmeyer hasn't coached receivers that makes you kind of question that hire, or what is it about that? Because Tom brought up a good point about Abdul Hodge having never coached and never playing tight end.
Right.
He seems to be filling that role admirably.
Well, let me just share with you what Coach Fry would say. If he was talking on this call, he might say something like this. Let's not forget, all you coaches, I judge you by how well you teach. And if your players in the position you're coaching, if your players are not showing clear progress from 1 week to the next, there's a problem with your teaching. Either there's a problem with their ability to learn, but I choose to blame you. You have to become a better teacher. The reason I bring it up that way, I think even the best Budmeyer fans would grudgingly admit Deacon did not make great progress over the season. And Coach Fry would say, I blame the student athlete to some degree, but I also blame the coach. And John Budmeyer has to live with the fact that Deacon did not improve as well as we needed him to. That's a fact. And I hate that I have to bring it up that way, but I'm being entirely honest. That's the truth. That's what played out this fall. That is a little bit of a concern going forward, regardless of what position John's coaching.
Spencer Petras did not improve under John Budmeyer's leadership in 2022.
Well, coaches are glorified teachers. That's what we are. And if your players aren't learning fast enough, there must be a problem with the teacher. That's how Coach Fry always felt. And we understood we better be great teachers, because our success with Hayden Fry depends on it. We all understood that, and we all took our teaching very, very seriously.
Don, have you had I know this is quick, and then we just got this announcement yesterday, but you talked with Scott Schaefer today. Have you talked with Tim Lester? Did Scott get you in touch with Tim?
I have not. I didn't even reach out to Tim. I will admit this. If Tim is our guy, I will probably attend the press conference, in part because I feel like I know Tim Lester. I feel that way because of how well I know Scott Schaefer and how well I know Monty Porter, the associate AD that was at Western Michigan when Tim showed up there. And Monty was there for 23 years. He saw Tim as a student athlete. Incidentally, again, he threw for over 11,000 yards in his 4 years. He also saw him as a quarterback coach. So he saw him on both ends. And last but not least, let me share one other thing. I didn't even reach out to this guy, but a third person also had a comment about Tim Lester, and I'll go ahead and share it with you. A guy named Tony Diappa, who was a strength coach for us at UConn, he texted me the other day. He said, "Hey, Coach P, congratulations. You guys have Tim Lester now as your OC." And then the quote was, "One hell of a coach." That was his comment. That goes back to North Central College. And the interesting thing, at North College, he was a coordinator. And Tony Diappa had that. So that's a sign in month. He was effective in Tony's eyes as a defensive coordinator. And of course, most of his expertise is on offense. And for that matter, I flash back on the fact that I started off on defense myself at North Texas. But of course, all my 20 years at Iowa were on offense, and everyone thinks of me only as an offensive coach. That's fundamentally true. But I did play defensive back, and of course, I played quarterback too. But I certainly feel like I know a lot more about offense than I do defense. Could I coach defensive backs? I could, but I would not be the expert that Phil Parker is, I'll tell you that. Nor would I be the expert that Scott Schaefer was years ago. So football is very, very specialized. It's not easy to coach positions that you've never coached. That's why typically you track them one position. And typically it's the same position that you played. If you had any kind of success as a player, the odds are, more often than not, that's the same position you have expertise at, and that's how you make your living as a varsity coach.
David wants to know, Coach, do you think we'll stay with zone blocking or integrate more gap with the new OC?
Hard to know. I would expect that it certainly might vary even from one opponent to the next. I don't think you can survive with either one of the two. You have to have elements of both. So I think we're still going to see zone concepts, and we're still going to see gap schemes too. And this year, if you had to pick one play that was successful for it, it was what we used to call rumble, or the more common name for it is our counter. You saw us pull lineman, or maybe a lineman, a pulling guard, and a tight end, and have play action away from the point of attack, and then we'd pull the guard. We'd double down with our guard and tackle on the play side if we're running weak. We'd pull the strong side guard to kick out on the edge rusher. We'd pull the tight end up through the hole. That was our best single play this year. We ran it with good success any number of games. So for that reason, I know we're not going to turn our back on gap schemes, because I think gap schemes overall worked best for us last fall. And yet I know we're not going to just go all in on gap schemes. We're going to have zone concepts too. We'll have both.
We're going to be here for the next 15 to 20 minutes at the minimum as we try to get through some calls that we had in the back burner while we had while we had Tom Kert on. We still have Coach Patterson with us. Bradley Gibson says everyone forgets Bill Belichick was fired from the Browns. We all know what happened after that. Kirk don't owe us nothing. He's earned the right to hire whoever he wants. Great hire. Appreciate the perspective, Bradley. Thank you for being here. And in answer to Lemansky's question, I guess I never really answered the question. What makes 2024 a success for me? I think what you said was, not to suck up, Don, but what you said, you hit the nail on the head, because the schedule is more difficult. But we have seen this program on a number of occasions win 9 or 10 games with putrid offense. I no longer am going to evaluate this program based solely on number of wins. I'm not. At least not right now. Not right now in this stratosphere of time. I need to see significant improvement with this offense. I think with the guys they have coming back, specifically Luke Lachey, Cade McNamara / Marco Lainez, bringing in Kaden Proctor, bringing back Caleb Brown. We'll see if they keep all the running backs, but they're going to bring back at least 2 or 3 of those guys. They have an opportunity. They should be able to, if Tim Lester is all he's cut out to be, we ought to see substantial improvement in week 1. Don, is that going too far? Like, we can compliment Tim Lester, but we ought to see significant improvement when they hit the field in early September. We should be seeing at least what you outlined for the season total. I mean, what did Iowa average this past year? Like 16, 17 points a game? Did they even average that?
Just imagine bumping that up to 25, what that wouldn't do for us.
Absolutely. And I don't know what the magic number is. I think 25 is a modest total. Remember us talking about how it was modest coming off the 2022 miserable year. We were talking about how the 7-5 and 25 points per game really wasn't shooting for the stars. 25
doesn't even put you at the 50th percentile, I don't believe. Probably have us somewhere in the 80s or 90s.
Lemansky adds the super chat. Bogus is a great word from the man of integrity.
I shouldn't have gotten so angry at Brian B. or whatever his name was. I forget.
I think it was Mitch. I believe it was
Mitch. That's right, Mitch B. Who said Mitch? Don't be afraid to use him. Stand behind your words.
I think we lost Don. You back now, Don?
I think so.
Okay, you're back with us.
Can you hear me?
I want to give everybody. We got you. Want to give everybody an update. Everybody, we got about 550 people on here, and I know everybody wants to know this. The Dallas Mavericks have come back to beat the Orlando Magic in dramatic fashion, 131-129. Luka Doncic with 45 points, 15 assists, and 9 rebounds. MFFL. Anyways. We'll move on to our next caller. We've got James here. James, welcome to the show.
I literally just got home from a game. We had one of the biggest games of the year tonight, so I probably missed everything that you guys said. So,
are you okay, James? You sound different.
Yeah, my voice is just off a little bit because I was yelling because we had a big game tonight. So,
okay.
James, promise us this: you pull this up and listen to it, having your free time up ahead.
Yeah, I will. I don't have much free time because we play for our conference championship tomorrow, so I'm gonna be focused on that. But after that, I probably have time to. I probably have to, but I probably missed most of what you said so far. Repeat myself. That's my fault. But First off, what's your thoughts on Bud Meyer being the wide receiver coach?
Well, we've addressed
Go ahead,
that.
Corey.
We've addressed that 2 or 3 times now. I'll address it again, James.
That's my fault, but
No, you're good. We're both skeptical. I'm skeptical about the Tim Lester hire, but I am. Don has talked me down to a good extent, and I have a lot of faith in who Don knows and his connections. And based on the intel, the perspective, the context of some of the numbers that have floated around out there about Tim Lester, I'm more encouraged than I was a day ago. And I'm anxious to meet Tom Lester and be able to talk with him at Media Day and hear from him during spring. So I'm absolutely excited to give the guy a chance. I think it's a huge upgrade from what I was come off of here at that position, specifically with coaching quarterbacks, but play calling. As it relates to John Budmeyer, I would be disappointed if that's the hire. And no wide receiver coaching experience, as Don brought up earlier. And it's not like he's lit the world on fire with quarterback development to give him some rave review as it relates to player development. A wide receiver is a concern moving forward, not just with recruiting, but with development.
for sure. But one thing we also have to think about, I mean, obviously this is a different perspective because of how well the position has done before this person. But Abdul Hodge's name I'm going to bring up in retrospective. He played linebacker at Iowa. And I think he's been a really good tight ends coach here, at least at Iowa. And that's a position he didn't even play in college.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier.
So
Don, can I just ask you a question? This is a question I wanted to address, and I didn't even know James was going to bring it up again. But can you give us an idea of maybe the positives, the positives as it relates to a former quarterback coaching wide receivers? What does a quarterback, what kind of advice and insight can a quarterback give to receivers based on experience?
Well, a lot, because let's face it, in the old days, Bill Snyder, as offensive coordinator, coached quarterbacks and receivers. And then when Bill went to K-State, I then coached quarterbacks and receivers. So think of it this way. The offensive coordinator back in time coached both positions. And it actually worked very well because they were all in meetings together. And it was obvious that the quarterbacks knew exactly what the receiver was being told because they were in the same meetings and vice versa. So it actually worked very well. At the very least, if there's 2 separate coaches with those 2 responsibilities, they have to for sure be on the same page at all times. And it gets into stuff that's pretty technical, such as, running the proper angle out of the break and understanding that the quarterback, if you're covered well, don't be shocked. You're on a certain angle, but he may throw you open, as we say. He may throw the ball purposely away from the defender, knowing that you understand that if the ball is not thrown on target. I thought it was really interesting. Think back to Laporta against San Francisco, and this is how I was kind of amazed. There were times when Laporta was over the ball was thrown to a deeper receiver, but honestly, if Laporta wanted to touch the ball, he could do it. Except Laporta realized that ball's not meant for me because it's not anywhere on target. I could get to it, but I have to really extend for it. It might even skip off my fingertips. That's not my ball. He was wise enough to let the ball go, even though he could have officially broken up the pass, right? He could have tried for it, but he knew Goff is too accurate for that. That's not my ball. That's the ball throwing downfield to someone else. And every time that ball went zipping over his head and he chose not to try to field it, sure as hell it ended up in the hands of a receiver for Detroit. I thought that was interesting to see that happen that way. Just gives you an idea of how confident those receivers are that they can identify which ball is for them and which one's not.
Another thing I have to bring up for me is I've been watching people talk about Lester and kind of what he was good at Western Michigan because obviously I had no idea of who he was, obviously. I know they said he ran a lot of RPOs. What's our thoughts on that perspective, or the RPO perspective of what he did at Western Michigan compared to? Obviously, I don't think they're going to do a lot of it, but they might maybe throw that wrinkle in here and there.
Well, I'm simply.
Caitlin brought it up in the chat here, Don, that she's worried that Kirk won't let him run more of that RPO. Your thoughts on that?
Well, you've heard me say already, I have no doubt the discussion was, okay, Tim, you have an awareness of what we did last fall. I want to hear for the next hour or maybe 2 hours, whatever. The floor is yours. You need to tell me how you're going to make this offense better as the OC. And I'm pretty sure Kirk would not have offered him the job if he didn't get a good answer out of Tim. That's typically how interview process goes. You're put under the microscope a little bit of tell me what you can do to make a difference in this offense. And if you don't introduce enough good information and make enough of an impression on me, you're not going to be our guy. What do you think of that? So you better have some ideas about how to make it better. And I have no doubt, not even for a second, that Tim had good ideas about how he can expand this offense and make us better than we've been. I'm confident in saying that.
Yeah, I think that'd be an interesting concept, and I think RPO here and there wouldn't be a bad idea just because it's something Iowa doesn't really throw or it doesn't really do that much. So it might be a little bit a different wrinkle, and something that gets the defense more on their heels, something else they got to look out for on top of the zone run and, the whatever else we're going to throw at them. I think that'd be something interesting. I just wanted to hear you guys' input on what I had for questions since I missed most of the show, but I'll go back and watch it. And everybody make sure to leave a like on this video. I think that's the most important. Support Corey because he does a great job, and hopefully we can keep winning basketball games for now because that's the season we're in, and hopefully all the things pan out next summer. And you can't get, I was told Kyle this last night, you can't get worse than last place. So I guess you can now because they're adding a team next year. So technically you can go down one more spot. But
I remember years ago, Don, watching a talent show with my grandparents. And my grandfather and I were kind of, I'll admit, we were kind of giggling because there was this girl on this talent contest on national TV that was not very good playing the piano. And my grandmother very positively said, well, she can probably get better. She'll probably get better. And my grandfather, this has always stuck with me. He made the simple yet very profound statement. He said, well, she has to get better. She can't get any worse. So I think what you say is true, James. And let's not, rip on Tim Lester. The guy does have a background that it gives us reason to believe he can bring a lot to this program. When we start playing the compare game, there's going to be opinions involved. And like I've said before, I get the skepticism, but.
Well, I was just saying it's hard for people not to compare because of who the last OC was.
Yeah.
Because it was the coach's son. That's the only reason I think it's going to be hard for them not to compare in that instance.
Yeah.
Well, right now we have some fans that don't have enough faith in Kirk. And they're basing it on the fact they're so short-sighted with their thinking. They questioned Kirk's judgment last fall at times. And they're suggesting that there's no way you can make a good judgment about who to hire this time. That's unfair to Kirk. But I understand their anxiety. Don't get me wrong. But I also know the man that's making that decision.
Yeah. And
one reason it's taken time is because he's determined not to make a mistake with who he hires.
But Don, this is not some. I want to make the guy. I am as transparent on the air as I am off the air. Don, you and I have personal conversations. I talked with you last night. I voiced some of the same concerns that some fans have voiced in the chat to you personally.
Absolutely. Sure.
And I appreciate you being able to understand those. And like I say, we don't have to have some black or white perspective on all this. It's fair to be skeptical for a number of reasons, not just because of Tim Lester, but because of what's happened recently with the offense. There's concerns with Kirk Ferentz. I get it. But I also think what you bring as far as insight into Kirk's hiring process, Don, along with the insight into Tim Lester is invaluable. So, James, appreciate your call. Anything else?
Enjoy your night and go Hawks as always.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the super chat. Caitlin, do appreciate that. BJ says, Corey, are you concerned with this hire affecting swarm donations? I have no idea. That'd be a better question for Brad Heinrichs. You might tweet at Brad. Maybe he'll be able to give you an idea. I think there's no question that swarm donations went up with the whole Kaden Proctor news. So, that was probably timed well, because had the Proctor news came after the offensive coordinator hire, maybe they would not have acquired as much as it relates to donations. I don't know that. And if Bud Meyer is promoted to wide receivers coach, there's going to be plenty of skepticism on that. And it's fair enough. I mean, you expressed some today, Don. there should be some skepticism. John Budmeier's got a lot to prove, especially a wide receiver, because he hadn't proven a whole lot at quarterback. And I don't know. I mean, when he was at Colorado for 1 year, I don't know who was coaching receivers there, but their passing game wasn't very good. I believe it was Todd Centeio was quarterbacking that team, I think. Anyways, we can go back and look at his tenure at Wisconsin, but he was coaching quarterbacks there. So
I lost you for a second there, Corey.
Jason wants you to address the difference between coaching or coordinating at the Big Ten level and at Western. Do you foresee any issues with Tim Lester's lack of OC experience at the Big Ten level? Are there any worries?
I'm not overly concerned about it. I'll tell you why. There are really, really good coordinators at all levels. There are really, really good coordinators in FCS football. There are guys that put as much work into their game planning on the FCS level as there are in FBS football. So they're outstanding coaches, for that matter, in Division II, Division III, and for that matter, in high school football. So it's just all about your commitment and your time and frankly, your ability to envision what needs to be done. You know, you've heard me talk about having imagination, playing the game of what if we did this? What if we did that? You gotta work at it. One of the things that Scott Schaefer told me that I was glad to hear, he described Tim. He said he's a grinder. He understands hard work, and he'll put in the time to develop the kind of plan that'll win for you. So that's what I was hoping to hear, because you've heard me talk about Corey. Coach Fry would say this, we didn't get it done very well next week, and I know you guys are up here late into the night, but the bottom line, we got to do a better job of planning for the next game than what we did last week. And we took that very seriously, and we probably did leave the office later. But if you're not prepared to make that kind of commitment, you're going to have a plan that's not as good as it might have been. And I was glad to hear that Tim is a hard worker. He understands that game planning takes time. You don't just slap it together. You don't just throw something against the wall and hope it sticks. It's got to be based on tons of research and tons of study. And I think Tim understands that.
South Bend Hawkeye asked me to put him in a timeout. And as soon as he used the F word, I granted him his request. You are in a timeout, South Bend Hawkeye. So hope you think about your behavior. And Don, when your children were growing up, did you use the timeout, the patented timeout?
Yeah, number two. Now, Berg will comment. One of the responses from Dad when I was a kid is, you're the kid and I'm the dad. That's why. You ask why? It's because you're the kid and I'm the dad. And so my vote counts for more than yours. Tough love again. I think one element of being a good parent is tough love. You let them know that you care about them dearly, but you're also going to be sure that they don't stub their toe and make mistakes maybe that you made as a kid. That's part of good parenting, I do think.
Marvin in the chat says, thanks, Don. Your insight enlightened me. I now believe. But he adds, is Kirk giving up his playbook and letting Lester have 100% control of the offense? If not, is this the same old thing?
Well, let me say this. And you got to realize Kirk and I go back to 1981. So his first 9 years, we worked together on offense. I was coaching tight ends back in the 80s when Kirk was here. And, of course, tight ends line up next to offensive tackles. So Kirk and I are talking all the time about how the front gets blocked. And for that matter, of course, there may be two tight ends on the field. But the bottom line is that I know Kirk well enough to really believe this in my heart. Kirk wants to leave this program in the best possible place. And I have to believe all of his judgment right now relates to making decisions that give us the best chance to be good, not just next fall, but to be good going forward. I think it's important to Kirk that he not shortchange Iowa. Iowa's been good to Kirk, and Kirk's been very good to Iowa too. And I think Kirk, it matters a lot to Kirk as to how Iowa football doesn't fare just in 2024. It matters to Kirk what happens in 2026 and 2028 and 2030. And I don't know how long Kirk will coach. That's his business. But I do know that he cares dearly about Iowa football. And for Kirk, it hasn't been all about the money either. He could have left before and hadn't chosen to do that because he's invested in Iowa football, and he understands that his job is to do the best job he can to take Iowa football forward. It's been easy to be a fan for the last 45 years, and he wants it to be easy to be a fan for the next 15 also. And part of that process is leaving it in a good place. I have no doubt in my mind that's important to Kirk to get that done.
Josh Gibson says Ronnie Harmon should be the next wide receivers coach. Don,
No.
you had Ronnie. Hold on a second. Don, you had Ronnie on a staff at Western Illinois.
I did.
And he, of course, played on an Iowa team that you were a part of that staff. Do you think that Ronnie Harmon would ever end up coaching somewhere at Iowa? It seems like there have been some, I don't want to say bridges burned, but that's kind of an odd relationship with Iowa right now. You just don't hear a whole lot of anything.
You know, I don't know what kind of background Ronnie has had in coaching since he and I departed ways. And we don't need to get into all the details, but I basically told Ronnie, I'm not going to allow you to coach the way you coached last fall here. And I'll just let it go with that. You know, I that's part of being a head coach is mentoring your coaches. If they're not doing it the way you want them to do it, then you need to help them understand what you expect them to do differently. And if they're not prepared to do that, then as I told Ronnie, I'll help you find another job somewhere. I don't want to officially fire you, but I'll let you go somewhere else and coach if you like it. I'll help you to get that next job. Ronnie's not the only guy that heard that from me. Any number of coaches heard that from me. But at times like that, there has to be an understanding of you're the boss and we're going to do it your way. And if you're not prepared as an assistant to understand that and take that into account, then you're going to have to go somewhere else.
Erica says her swarm donations will not continue if the offense doesn't take a step forward. Well, that's your money, Erica. That's you have every right to say that.
Yeah.
DC Hawkeye says, come on, coach. Allowing the Iowa offense to sink to the bottom because of nepotism is a huge reason for lack of faith and concern.
I'm glad you pulled that one up because I noticed that, and I am familiar with DC Hawkeye. I know that in so many cases we are in agreement with you seem to be in agreement with a lot of my thoughts, and I will acknowledge I can understand that the fans are a little bit skeptical of Kirk's judgment at this point, and I'm basing that only on things that happened or didn't happen last fall. But I would just encourage you to look at the bigger picture. Has Kirk shown good judgment? With very exception, the answer is yes. I think it's important that Kirk. I think Kirk feels it's important that he demonstrate that good judgment all over again with this hire, and that he recognize. Let me say it this way about our offense: I don't think there's any way we can achieve this unless we perform at a high level in all three. Offense, defense, and kicking. 2 out of 3 is nice. You can win football games with 2 out of 3, but you're going to be hard pressed to win championships. And when I say championships, I mean national championships. I mean Big Ten titles. That involves winning at Indy. Whether you're the 1 seed or the 2 seed, it doesn't matter. That involves winning a game that's difficult to win. That to do that, you got to win in all 3 areas. We proved against Michigan. Defense played lights out. I will admit that we fell down on our kicking game, but the battle that we lost decisively, of course, was our offense versus Michigan's defense. And that's why the game was one-sided. It was one-sided to some degree, of course, with that big punt return. But in spite of the fact that our defense played a great football game, we still lost. So if you want to win the big prize, you've got to be outstanding in all 3 areas. And to do that, we have to clearly make a change on offense. I agree with you, DC Hawkeye. We have to show significant improvement on offense to be able to win a championship. That would include a Big Ten championship, a game 1 at Indy in the near future. And then beyond that, of course, if you win a Big Ten title, you should have a chance to compete for a national title. That's what we've seen already, of course, in recent years. And I think that's going to continue. This conference can compete with any conference in the country, to include the SEC. And we demonstrated that this year with Michigan being able to win the title themselves.
Let's go back to our call-in line. Thank you for calling Hawkeye Hangout with Coach John Patterson. Who's on the line?
This is Dick Colony in Michigan.
Hey, Dick, how are you?
Good. Hey, this has been a very good program. I think having Don and Tom on added a lot of context to the records that I heard people complaining about yesterday on the phone with the hiring over the Tim Lester. And I would suggest that anybody that didn't hear the whole show tonight, they should go back and listen to it, because it offers an awful lot of context that people didn't have yesterday.
Absolutely.
Another thing is, I think the concern, it's been expressed for a long time, and I heard it tonight, that there were concerns that Kirk wouldn't let the new offensive coordinator run it the way he wanted to. And I think if you go back and listen to the podcast, Corey, you had with Brad Heinrich, I think he dispelled an awful lot of thoughts that when Kurt hired as a coordinator, they have a meeting of the minds, but he lets that coordinator run that department. And go back and listen to that. I think you'll dispel a number of things that were concerned. I think another is that I believe Bud Meyer had an awful lot of input in order to get Cade McNamara as well as Deacon Hill from his previous contacts, either at Wisconsin or because I believe they were trying to recruit. It was either Wisconsin or another place. They were trying to recruit Cade's younger brother, and so the family was very familiar with Bud Meyer, and that was I don't know, it was a primary, but it was a big factor in getting Cade and Deacon, and those were our quarterbacks last year.
Right.
Another thing, people said, well, coming from a MAC school, where did the new Michigan head coach come from? Central Michigan. He was I believe, offensive line coach, if I'm not, or defense. He was on defense for Bob Stoops at Oklahoma, and I believe he was a line coach at Central. In fact, he was offensive line coach when he came to Michigan, and then he's been the offensive coordinator for when the coach had to sit out a few games. And I think the MAC schools, they say, well, just playing MAC competition, but the Central Michigans and Western Michigans play generally at least one Big Ten school probably every off season or non-conference season. So and they're I think that's anyhow, I really appreciate the show tonight, and would suggest people go back and listen to Brad Heinrichs on that show you had, because I think he dispelled a lot of concerns about, well, he wouldn't let the offense or coordinators do their job. So that's all I had to say. Enjoyed the show tonight.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you calling in.
Thank you.
Don, anything to respond to Dick on number of counts there? I think several really good points, including that something that you've talked about, that Kirk is not micromanaging every play call on game day. Just your thoughts on some of those comments.
Well, I was just glad to hear him say what he said. And it sounds to me like he has an idea, too, that Kirk recognizes that's a way for us to become a better team, is to give the coordinator, whoever he is, to give him more authority to more ownership. A good way to say it is more ownership. Does the offense belong to the offensive coordinator? Well, to a large degree, it does. Let's face it, he's the one that puts more work into it than any single person. Kirk doesn't have the time he can't dedicate as much time to it as the OC can. And that's the same way when I was the OC or Bill Snyder was the OC. Hayden didn't have the time that we had. So I took a lot of ownership in that game plan. And it was important to me that it be as good as it could possibly be because our success on Saturday depended on it. And I think Kirk feels that way and recognizes that let's give this guy a chance to do his job and let's see where it goes because here's a couple of things that come to mind. One of the things that Scott Schaefer said, talking about, let's not forget, Corey, the coach of the year, the assistant coach of the year spent more than a little bit of time coaching at Toledo. His name was Phil Parker. Let's not forget that. Here's one that Scott Schaefer brought up to me today. He kind of laughed and he said, I remember when Ohio State made a hire a few years ago, people wondered, they questioned that hire because their coach that they hired came in from Youngstown State. Who the hell is Youngstown State? Well, that guy's name is Jim Tressel, and he won a national title for Ohio State. And I jokingly remind Jim all the time, one reason that I have some kind of recognition as a head coach in college football is because I'm one of the few coaches out there that has a 500 record versus Jim Tressel. We only coached against each other twice. They beat us the first year at Youngstown, and we got cheated by the refs, but that's what might happen to you on the goal line. The next year in Macomb, we beat them. And that's the last time I coached against Jim Tressel. But we still laugh about that. We're 1-1 against each other, 500. He had a lot better record at Youngstown than 500, and he had a lot better record at Ohio State, too, than 500. And Ohio State will tell you, Ohio State fans have very little bad to say about Jim Tressel because he did his job and he did it well. And so there's another guy that did not impress people with his hiring. Why is Ohio State hiring a coach from Youngstown? Because the AD had a good idea of what he was getting. And that's precisely why Bup Elliott hired Hayden Fry. Iowa fans, even back then, maybe looked down their nose a little bit. You mean we have to go to North Texas to hire our coach? Here's what Bup Elliott knew. When he was the Michigan coach, he played against an SMU team, and for some odd reason, he had a hard time beating them, even though the talent level at Michigan was definitely superior to SMU. That reason was the coaching of Hayden Fry and his staff. And Bup knew that, and that's why Bup hired Hayden, because Hayden was going to get a lot of mileage out of the Iowa players. Which is, of course, spelled out over the next 20 years. We got that done.
Lemansky, appreciate the super chat. Gave up season tickets years ago after 20 years due to costs. Considered getting back into tickets because of Beth and Phil. Show me in 2024. Member of the Swarm in 23. Kings fan. Mavs settle for. Mavs settle for. ... Don, can you interpret the last part of that comment from Lemansky?
I'm stumped.
I do appreciate the super chat, Lemansky. And Caitlin with the super chat as well. She says there's no way Kirk can expect us to get a single wide receiver with Budmeyer coaching. Every school will use this against us. It's a joke. I feel bad for the current wide receivers. You have every right to feel that way, Caitlin.
I will say, you've heard me say this before. I think in hiring coaches, one of the things you have to consider nowadays is how well can that position coach sell the program. And the first thing he has to do is be good at his position. Coach Fry made no bones about it. Your job is to recruit players to your position that are going to make us as strong as we can possibly be at your position. You recruit your area geographically, but you also recruit your position. And it does help if you have some kind of recognition, either for how you've coached in the past at that position or how you've played at that position. Otherwise, it's a little more a leap of faith. And let's face it, recruiting is all about sales. And that should be part of the equation in hiring any coach. What kind of salesman can he be? What kind of effective recruiter can he be for us going forward?
Tyler, becoming a premium member here on the YouTube channel. Thank you, Tyler. Do appreciate that. And Graham wants to know your thoughts on Linez getting all the first team reps in spring ball. I don't know about all of them, right, Don? But it'd be nice to run him as the number one.
Well, you heard me say after the Tennessee game, in my thought process, if Cade's not taking any snaps, then the one snaps should be with Marco. And if Deacon's upset with that, my response would be, prove me wrong. But you've had a lot of opportunity to prove you're the better quarterback, and you haven't taken very good advantage of your chance. That's the reality of where we are. Coach Fry always talked about honest assessment. Be honest with your players. Let them know if they're falling short of your expectations. Be fair with your expectations, but hold them to a high standard. Otherwise, we're not gonna win championships.
Don, Jay wants to tell you thank you for talking him off the ledge.
Well, I'm glad we got that accomplished, because we need to keep that person around. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you for the compliment, Michael. He says great content tonight. Appreciate that. DC Hawkeye, you are a good man, coach. Not a good coach. You're a good man, Don.
Well, thank you, DC Hawkeye. I appreciate that, and I know you're sincere with what you say.
Don, can I second that? You are a good man.
Well, you know, I have great loyalty to Iowa football. I invested 20 years of my life in Iowa football. Truthfully, I've invested more than 20 now, because I'm still giving Iowa football a fair amount of my free time. And I do it for a reason. I care about those players. I care about those coaches. And I also care about the fans, because the fans have ownership in the program. Corey, it's no secret. You know, I don't do this because of any compensation that might come my way. I do it because I'm trying to properly thank the fans for all the support they gave us over our 20 years here. And I'll always be that way, because I care dearly about Iowa football, and I have great appreciation for those that feel very much as I do about Hawkeye ball.
And appreciate, again, so thank you for the super chat, DC Hawkeye. Erica says playoffs should be the goal. That should be the goal, especially with the expanded playoff. I'm absolutely fine with that, Don, right? It's going to be hard.
You caught me off guard here, Erica. I wasn't prepared for a Hayden story tonight.
She wants a Hayden story as well. Maybe we can say, if you think of one here in the next few minutes, we can get to that. But with the expanded playoff, Don, I've made the comment, I think it's going to be easier to make the playoff than it is to win the Big Ten moving forward. So it absolutely should be something that's talked about, I think. Don't you think?
It's hard to imagine that 4 teams in the Big Ten might get in the playoffs every year. I think that's realistic.
Absolutely. Connor McCaffrey, not the Connor McCaffrey that's dating Caitlin Clark, which, of course, that's not his only calling card, but that's what a lot of people say. Kind of like Taylor Swift, right? Like, Travis Kelce's a football player, but he's also like, he's just Taylor Swift's boyfriend, right? Like, Connor McCaffrey's a basketball player, but he's just Caitlin Clark's boyfriend.
Well, this particular Connor chooses to misspell his name, I guess.
Yes, he wants to know about Kirk Ferentz getting to over 600, which I believe is the Hall of Fame minimum. Is that correct, Don?
You know, we've never had those kind of discussions. I don't know that Kirk worries about that. I think Kirk simply worries about being the best coach he can be. You know, the wins take care of themselves. If you do your job the right way and your coaches and players do the same, then you'll get your fair share of wins. I've always been able to say, I do know that I coached 425 football games. I am aware that we won a lot more than half of them, but I don't know what that final record is over those 425 games. It is a point of pride with me that we won considerably more than we lost over all those years. That does matter to me. And as a coach once told me, never forget this. I'd just been named head coach at Western Illinois, and he said, be sure you understand this. From this point forward, you'll always have 2 numbers after your name. You need to be sure that that first number is a lot bigger than the second, because otherwise you won't have the privilege of coaching as a head coach very long. The first number needs to be bigger, and thankfully it always was bigger. And but I don't think Kirk sits around worrying about exactly what he needs to do to get the 600 percentage. Of course, he'd like to be honored after he's done coaching. But that's not as important as just doing your job every day of the week and then twice on Sunday.
Andy O says he met you at a tailgate a while back and really appreciates you. I echo that. Brandon wants to know what will your relationship be like with Tim Lester, with your analytics that you do for the program?
I will admit this. I am aware right out of college, Tim Lester's first job relating to high school football, I believe he was the OC at that high school, but I also couldn't help but notice he was a math instructor. So that's one more thing we have in common. I would be willing to bet you that Tim Lester's probably into analytics too, if only because he's spent a lot of his time with numbers, just as I did. So I'll be disappointed in him if he's not big into analytics. I'm confident of this, Corey. Once he sees one of those reports on the Big Ten, he's going to be a believer that this stuff does matter. It does help to know what you need to do to find a way to win. And I'm confident he'll embrace the analytics that we provide to Iowa football just as the coaches always have.
Cole says, not surprised Corey skipped my super chat. Yeah, I'm just out to get you, Cole. I love this kind of comments. Cole says, with the super, I didn't skip your super chat. We have a way of doing this here. Cole says, I think that Kirk doesn't want to win a national championship. He could take a step back higher. He could take a step back, hire an elite OC, and instantly be a contender, but he chose not to. Well, again, you do not know. Let's not state things like they're fact. You do not know that Tim Lester will not be a slam dunk hire. You don't know that. I don't know that. Right. And we don't know that he will be. Kirk doesn't know that. Okay? Again, black and white. I know that over people in Nebraska, all they know is red and brown dirt, but that's about it. So let's just establish we don't have to have this black and white type of thinking. All right? It's not necessary. Let's let it play out. And I understand maybe there's some jesting there and a Nebraska fan in here, but I do appreciate Cole being here as always. Tyler, appreciate the super chat. He says, Coach, do you think Marco would be the better QB1 based on injury concerns as well as the style with the offense?
He's talking about who starts game one next fall, assuming everyone's healthy. It just depends on how they compete between now and then. It would take an incredibly productive spring and summer and fall camp for Marco to be able to win the nod as starting quarterback in game one over Cade with all of Cade's experience. He doesn't have to do that. He just simply needs to be able to advance as fast as he can and understanding how to be the best possible quarterback, and then have faith that the coaches are going to recognize his progress, his improvement. I know last fall I told Marco, this is right after the Minnesota game, I won't mind sharing this with you. That week I was over to drop off the analytics. I purposely waited for Marco after practice, and I said, Marco, I just want to give you credit for really, he was out after practice doing extra work, as a lot of players do sometimes. The practice is officially done. They're still working a little bit, maybe on their own or maybe with another player at their position. And I said, Marco, I just want to congratulate you. You're off to a great start here. I know that primarily because of talking to a lot of players and understanding how they feel about you. I want to congratulate you on doing all the right things. And I just want to encourage you, continue to get yourself ready as best you can from one week to the next. Continue to learn. And I simply encourage you to do that because you don't know when the opportunity is coming. But I promise you, it's going to come sooner or later, and it might be sooner than you expect. Well, it turned out I was wrong. It wasn't sooner than he expected. He did smile, and he said, Coach, that's my goal, is to get myself ready as best I can in the shortest amount of time. And he's probably disappointed that he didn't play until game 14 of the season. But when he went in that Tennessee game, he gave a good account of himself. And fans have reason and teammates have reason to be excited about what Marco might be before he leaves Iowa. I certainly wanted to talk to him along that vein because I wanted to be sure he understood that he's very appreciated here by old coaches that used to coach here and that know a little bit about what they're talking about. And I think he's got a great future here. And I don't know when he's going to become the starter. That'll depend on a lot of things. It'll depend on how Cade's playing in the early season. It'll depend on all those other quarterbacks that are in camp. And of course, it'll depend on what Marco's doing. But I have a lot of hope for that young man because I think he's got excellent tools to work with. And it would not surprise me if he leaves here as a great quarterback. I think that's the kind of upside that he has.
How much do you think it was Kirk's decision to double down on Spencer Petras and double down on Deacon Hill as opposed to Brian's decision? How much do you think the offensive coordinator played in that decision making?
That is hard to know. But let's face it, part of the input came from Deacon Hill. Came from Bud Meyer also, because Brian was the OC, but we also know that John Budmeyer had everything to do with quarterback play this year. There's no doubt about that. That happened. So I don't know. It's hard to know. I'm not sure what the answer there. Those are meetings that I'm not part of. So I speculation on my part. There's really no way to know for sure.
Spencer Petras was not lighting the world on fire in 2021. We saw no sign of a desire to change, experiment at quarterback in 21. John Budmeyer was not on the staff in 21, so I think that's noteworthy.
Right.
But fair enough. Let's go to our next caller. We have got Tom, and we're going to try to wrap this up here in a little bit. So we're going to try to keep these last couple of calls somewhat short. We'll go to Tom. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Corey, you always hold me till the end.
Well, you always call in at the end, Tom.
Well, I got
Call
to
in
listen to the whole
earlier,
show,
Tom.
you know?
Now that's because you're
I know it's
the closer. You're coming in the bottom of the ninth.
So, all right. So, Dawn, we've heard all about the coach and everything. So, Erica wants some history. This is all before Corey, but my number one game for the Iowa Hawkeyes is when we beat Michigan at home with Chuck Long over Michigan 12-9. Another game that stands out to me is Penn State 1984. We beat them 20-17 at Happy Valley.
For the record,
and I
Tom,
know you remember that game.
I do, but that Michigan score incidentally was not 12-9; it was 12-10 because we were down
12-10, yeah, 12-10. Yep. And my third game, which as a young man, believe it or not, I was a young man then. Actually, I was a kid, but anyway. I believe it was 1983 at West Lafayette. Do you remember that game?
Well, I'm
beat
trying to
Purdue
think.
40-3. Is that correct? I believe.
I guess I didn't remember that one.
And that's the first time that we beat Purdue at West Lafayette since 1958. And I remember listening to that game on the radio, and it was a big deal.
Well, I do remember this. When we first got to the Big Ten, they referred to it as the Big Two and the Little Eight, but we identified Purdue as the third team. And we knew it's going to be hard to beat Michigan, Ohio State. We'll get there eventually. But in the meantime, let's be sure we conquer some of these other teams. And we clearly saw Purdue as the third team.
Yeah. So, yeah, we hadn't beat them since 1958 at West Lafayette.
Yeah.
So, anyway, getting into current news. Corey, this for you. I see big viewership for next year for you on your program.
Okay.
Because if we'd have got what we wanted and everything would have been perfect, nobody'd call in and nobody'd watch it. So you've got a good year next year. A lot of questions.
Wait a minute. Hold on a second.
Good viewership.
Are you trying to tell me that if Chip Kelly took over as the offensive coordinator,
it would have been a dead show?
Okay.
He would have been great and everything would have been good. But you've got a program for next year, right? You're signed on.
As long as Don Patterson is here, we got a program.
Yeah, you're right with that.
And you got a call in earlier, Tom.
I suppose. Yeah, the only thing, hey, I'm okay with whatever.
Do you live out in the
My
country,
thing
Tom?
is, huh?
Do you live out in the country?
Yeah.
I knew it.
Didn't I tell you? I
No,
actually, I
no,
don't want
no,
to
no. I
call
just
me a
knew it.
farmer or not.
Yeah, you just look like a good old Iowa farmer. That's not an insult, don't you think, Don?
I know. Some of your callers will tell me I need a shave, and it's on the list. You know,
Tom, I
but
was going to say, I thought Corey was going to say you impress him as a man's man.
Some of the callers say I need to shave, Tom. So look at that, kicking back on some Bush
yeah, I
Light.
see them callers. Yeah. Well, the other day when you had a caller call in and talk about Steve Carfino and Greg Stokes and all them, that brought back a lot of good memories to me. But
I remember those guys
Steve
too. Those guys were fun to watch.
Weren't they?
Absolutely.
I mean that it just. I went back and watched some 1980 basketball games. You could probably say about this football games. They made it that you wanted to be there, and television doesn't do that today. They just pull in for the tip, and you're gone. They don't do starting lineups, none of that stuff. But anyway, the other thing is I'm on a board. It's voluntary. It's voluntary, and we had to hire a new person, right, to be our head go round. And I have the same problem that probably Kurt did. It doesn't mean you always get the person you absolutely want. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But is this guy good enough to do it? Probably yes. So I understand that sometimes we can't always get who we want. You know what I'm saying? But you try to get the best person to fill that spot.
Right.
And only time will tell.
Absolutely.
So I'm
right.
all about giving this guy a shot. I don't care whether he was in the MAC or where he was at. You know, he's got the ability. You know, that part doesn't matter to me.
Well, just to reassure the listeners, I've known a lot of great coaches that did not come from big schools, that accomplished great things at smaller schools and then went on to success at big schools. There's a bunch of them out there. There are a lot of them that are coaching in the NFL right now that are even head coaches in the NFL that didn't have an impressive background in terms of how big the schools were. That's the truth.
So anyway, Corey, that's all I got for you. We'll tune in later. I was going to start out wanting to talk about the women's basketball and the men's basketball games because that's what you talk about Iowa football during all those kind of shows. So, but we'll save that for another day.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Appreciate the call from Tom. And yeah, we got men's basketball tomorrow, women's basketball Wednesday. It doesn't stop, Don. It doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Has your wife ever said that to you about anything sports related?
Well, we enjoy basketball. You know, we make every women's home game. We make a lot of the men's games, not all of them, but a lot of them. So, yeah, we are going to be in Carver Hawkeye for Ohio State on Friday this Friday. And we're also going to be in our seats on February the 11th. We play. Who do we play on the 11th? I can't remember now who we play. Who do we play on the 11th? I know we have a home game on the 11th. And then the women's games, I'm not sure of those dates right now, but we're always checking to be sure we don't miss a home game for our women either.
The men play Minnesota on the 11th.
Minnesota, yeah.
Don, I've said this to you before, and you're a man of many words, but we're going to go quick fire on these last few comments. So
I'm motivated to uphold your standard.
Okay.
I'll warn the listeners now, not 25 words or less. How about 10 words or less?
David says, what would be the first play you would call if you came out of retirement?
The first play? I would probably, it depends on who I'm playing. You know, I would probably do something like that. First play. Well, who are we playing though? Tell me that.
let's say you're playing Iowa State. Let's just move that game up a week, and you're playing Iowa State.
I would go, if I'm on the left hash, I'd go right, which means pro right. Pro right, 43 pop out pass, Z post. I'd go play action post and try to hit a home run on first snap. Incidentally, you saw the fourth play that Detroit ran last night.
Oh, yeah.
A reverse on the fourth play of the game.
Yeah.
Perfect time to call it.
I tell you, they were rolling in that game, Don. Until
Yes,
Dan Campbell decided to roll the dice on 4th and 3, they were rolling, and he kicks a field goal there. Momentum doesn't shift. You're up 17. I'm convinced they'd be playing for the Super Bowl. That loss is on the coaching staff, on Dan Campbell.
Well, one of the things I figure every year, I simply call it, that section of the report is Belichick's beliefs. And Belichick said this when he was the head coach with the Patriots all those years. He said, if we have a 14-point lead at any point in the game, we should win that every time. And so Brian actually is the one that brought it up to me. Brian said, Coach, I'm wondering if that would hold up in college football. And I said, well, we'll find out. We'll look at it specifically in the Big Ten. The thing I learned and was able to confirm, it doesn't hold up in the Big Ten. Maybe it holds up for the Patriots, but if it holds up, it's because A, they're really good on offense, that's back in the Brady days, and B, they're really good on defense. So, and C, NFL games involve fewer snaps than a college game, as you probably know. Average college game, if it has 12 possessions, maybe the average NFL game only has 10, something like that. Fewer opportunities. So maybe that 14-point rule holds up for the Patriots and Coach Belichick, but in the Big Ten, 14 is not safe. Every year, I'd say in general, 17 is safe, but even 17 is not entirely safe. Now, I'll go on by saying 17, if you've got an Iowa defense, that's a safe lead. I can't see us ever blowing a 17-point lead. But Detroit sure blew one, didn't they, against a very good 49er team. But they contributed to it. I think you're right. You got to understand when to shorten the game, when to protect the lead. Kirk's exactly right. If you get a lead at the University of Iowa, the odds are you maintain that lead. You go in and win the game. The challenge for us, of course, has been able to consistently establish a lead.
Coyle Stipulate says, how much do you each think that Johns was worth contract-wise compared to Lester? How much would you be willing to pay him? Boy, hard to know, not being in that position. These are just so, as far as finances are concerned in the world of college football and what guys are getting paid, it's just hard to.
Yeah. Knowing that Johns was looking for a job here in late January, and knowing that Lester's looking for a job here in late January, I would be surprised if money was a huge factor. Honestly, I'd be disappointed if it was, frankly, because does it really matter whether you're making 1.0 or 1.2 or 1.5? They're all a lot of money. And who are you to question if that's not enough? To be honest with you, if somebody was balking because of money, I would just tell them, go somewhere else, because you're coaching for all the wrong reasons anyway. It should not be all about money. That's just how I feel. I guess anybody that has been underpaid in their 37 years of coaching might justify their being underpaid by saying it never was about money anyway. That's the truth. It never was about money for me. Thankfully, I made a fair amount of money over my lifetime. But we still wouldn't have much money today if we hadn't done a good job of saving our money and investing our money. It wasn't because they paid us exorbitant amounts. That's not how it used to work.
Tyler with the super chat, can we admit Kirk does have influence on the overall philosophy of the offense, and that constrains the OC to his pro style, which is proven to not work for the last 3 seasons. It's proven to not work over the last 3 seasons with the offensive coordinator that was in place, with the play caller that was in place, with the quarterback's coach that was in place, with the wide receivers coach that was in place. That's why we're seeing changes. So I appreciate the super chat, Tyler. And yes, you're right about overall philosophy, but there are multiple variables at play here, and some of the variables have been changed with the departure of Kelton Copeland, the addition of Tim Lester, and if it's John Budmeyer, it's John Budmeyer, wide receivers coach, but they will have a different wide receivers coach come spring practice. Tyler Gibson says, I don't see the join button. Tyler, if you're interested in becoming a premium subscriber, which I know you brought up earlier, should be pretty simple to do that. If you're over on YouTube and you're on the channel, just go to the YouTube channel. I'll share it here on the screen. This is the YouTube channel. You'll see this button right here. See the button there, folks, that says join. Scroll right down here. It says join. All right. And then you'll get some options here and some information. That's how you join. Now, this is the desktop version. If you're on iPhone, Apple, my understanding is that join button doesn't always show up on the app. So do it on the browser if you can, Tyler. Appreciate you doing that, considering being a subscriber. DC Hawkeye says, if Beth didn't remove Brian, would Brian still be the OC? It's all hypothetical, right? But I think there's a chance that would have happened. But with the contract that was in place that was established pre-Beth Getz, the obvious answer is no. Had that contract not been put in place, I don't
Yes, yes, Corey, with the shutouts back-to-back at the end of the year, Brian would have recognized.
It could be right.
I have to look elsewhere. This is not working. You know, I'm not going to let my days go down in flames here. I'm going to move on.
Tyler, appreciate you doing that, becoming a premium subscriber. Jared says, what are your thoughts on Alabama fans crying about tampering with Proctor? I think that will be resolved. I think it's ridiculous given everything that's going on. But hey, if there was tampering, then it needs to be looked into. But I think the nature of the so-called tampering compared to what's going on nationally is ridiculous. Hawkeye Howard, Coach, how do you feel about Proctor coming home?
I'm excited about him being here simply because he wants to be here. I think he missed the great state of Iowa. And, you know, I used to have coaches tell me sometimes there's nothing worse than finishing second on a recruit. And as you know, back in those days, at least, you could make 5 official visits. I'm not sure anymore what the rules are. But obviously, his point was if you put a lot of time in recruiting a guy, thinking you're going to get him and you finish second, that's terrible because you wasted all that time. My response always was, I'm not going to burn any bridges. I'm going to wish him good luck wherever he goes because you know what? We might catch him on the rebound. So it's better to leave guys in a good place, congratulate them on their decision, thank them for giving you a chance to sell your school, and then don't be shocked if you hear from them again, if you live them the right way. Because they want to feel wanted and appreciated. Leave them that way in the recruiting process. Is it hard to imagine that they might reach out to you if things don't go exactly as they hoped?
Frank Adamo says, what's the over-under for actual games Cade will play this next year?
I'm not going to touch that one. Go ahead, Corey.
I don't know about that. I'd just be grasping at straws. I'll say 8. Because I think he's going to be the starter. But is there a chance there's a change? Is there a chance there's injury? Yeah, so I'll say 8, which is probably going to be the over-under for Iowa wins.
I was wondering if game 8 is a really difficult game that you're looking at. Maybe.
No. I'm just saying in general total for the season, the mean for me is 8. Michael says, Don, I'm a Hawkeye fan with a Saluki degree. What was your record against Southern Illinois?
You know, in my defense, Jerry Kill's an outstanding coach also, as you remember. One of the most interesting games I was ever part of, Corey, you heard me talk about it. We lost 54-52 to a Jerry Kill Saluki team at Southern Illinois. And after that game, Coach Fry called up and said, I want to congratulate you, Coach Patterson. You did something in coaching that I was never able to do. And I said, what's that, Coach? And he said, you scored 52 points and managed to lose. And he got a good laugh out of that. And of course, I thanked him for that little nugget of information, as if I didn't know it already. It's hard to lose when you score 52 points. But as you know, if it becomes a scoring contest, you might lose that. That's why it's so important to be able to rely on your defense.
Kasha Shah, if I'm pronouncing that right. When will there be an interview with Kirk or Lester about the hire? We talked about that earlier with Tom Kert. Probably sometime in the next week. But could they wait until official signing day? That's possible. But we will see. No word yet. No official announcement from Iowa. No word yet on when a press conference may or may not happen. DC Hawkeye, would you agree that if the offense doesn't change much, then this speaks more about Kirk Ferentz than anything else? History will show that Iowa wasted the fantastic defenses over the past few years. I can certainly agree with that. And Don, you said, to some extent, a head coach, just like AD, an AD is going to be evaluated based on who he or she hires. If Tim Lester, a reflection on Kirk, it is.
Absolutely.
So to some extent, absolutely DC Hawkeye. And Brandon, Don, do you think Kirk felt Lester has a more balanced approach offensively than Johns would at OC?
I don't doubt that. That might have been part of his thinking. Who knows if it was just a gut feeling that he had after both of them being in front of him and from an interview standpoint, both of them interacting with our coaching staff. It's entirely possible. I do know this from talking to Scott Schaefer. He made the comment. He said, "Believe me, Tim understands the value of running the football. Running the football will always be a priority for Tim, and that doesn't mean that his ultimate goal, of course, is to have a good balance running pass, be able to keep people off balance. That's where the RPOs come in. Of course, is being able to take advantage of your running game." And of course, there are other deep passes down the field that relate to play action also that can make a difference in your season. That chunk plays are a big part of what we always did. I remember when we getting ready to play Lee Corso in season 1, Hayden knew. Here's the Hayden story for Brandon right now. We're getting ready to play Indiana in game 1 in 1979. And we're in a meeting, and Hayden says to the entire staff, but he directs his attention specifically to Bill Brazier. He said, "Bill, let me tell you about Lee Corso. I know Lee Corso, and I will guarantee you they're going to throw it deep downfield at least half a dozen times over the course of the game. That's who he is. He's going to air it out at least half a dozen times, and we better be ready, because the truth is, if he hits on only 2 of them, he's happy." And that's a true statement. Lee Corso would do that. He had a guy named Dwayne Gunn. If you go back and look, this is back in the 80s somewhere, Indiana did not have a great offense, but they got chunk plays out of Dwayne Gunn every game because they're going to throw it deep to him a lot, and he can high point a ball, and you better have great position in the back end, because otherwise he'll win the jump ball. And that was part of playing Lee Corso. And I guess that's one reason I always liked the idea of throwing it up deep downfield. We had a receiver at Western Illinois that's now the receiver coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers. His name was Frisman Jackson, and he was a 1,000-yard receiver playing for us. So part of the game plan is throw it deep to Frisman, because he'll probably catch it. It doesn't matter if he's covered or not. Throw it anyway, because if it becomes a jumping contest, a rebound contest, he'll probably win that too. That's what we did. What?
Jason says, has there been any rumors on Brian if he's had any opportunities? I have not heard anything, but I've also not asked.
I haven't either. I don't know a word about it. As we know, that the NFL is going through some change even now. Now a lot of teams are done playing. Of course, there's only 2 left standing. So there's a lot of movement right now. I've always made this comment about NFL coaching. Seems to me like it's a big game of musical chairs. The music stops and everybody finds a chair. So if you're in the league, you might have to move to another team, but the odds are you'll find employment somewhere else if you've got any kind of longevity in the league already. That's what often happens. So I guess you could argue it's not easy to break in if you don't have some kind of background in the NFL. I think there's some truth to that. But of course, Brian does have some prior experience in the NFL, not to mention ties that both he and his dad have in the NFL. And I suspect that Brian will find an opportunity in the pros coaching. I don't know that. Maybe he'll coach again in college. I don't know how Brian feels about college versus pro. Right now, to be honest with you, pro football looks more attractive to me simply because I'm not crazy about the transfer portal and NIL. And as you've heard me say, Corey, even the NFL has a salary cap.
Yep.
Right now, college football has no salary cap. How fair is that?
Tyler says, if for some reason we have a top 70 offense, how many wins do you think they'll have? I think if they have a top 5 defense, you're probably looking at another 10-plus win season, but that's a big jump to go from 130 to top 70. I think they got a chance to win 10 or more games if they do that. And boy, we're going to be jumping from rooftops in a good way. if all of a sudden Tim Lester comes in here and they get that kind of a jump. I would not expect that, folks. Like, don't expect the offense to go from 130 to 65. I don't think that's reasonable. I think they should be aspiring for top 100. I think top 70 might be a little bit much, but we'll see. And we don't know what's going to happen in the portal after the spring practice window. Tyler, appreciate the super chat. He says, do you ever see an option for us getting Chuck Long in? No. Chuck Long was already a part of the staff back in 99. I believe he was the co-OC or the co-quarterbacks coach. I do not foresee him coming back. And Don, I don't think you do either. I have a lot of respect for Chuck Long. Very nice guy, great player. But I don't expect him to be there. Brandon says, thank you for making us feel better about the OC hire, Don. Absolutely. And I would echo that. If I missed you, I know Kyle wasn't in the queue. We didn't get to Kyle. Appreciate him hosting the show last night. Again, Don and I are here throughout the football season, but whenever there's a big story, we'll probably talk again leading into spring practice. Don is here. Please hit the like button. And a reminder for everybody, if you haven't done this, all right, shop Amazon with us. Make your daily purchases or your weekly purchases that you make on Amazon. Just click the link. All the products you normally purchase are available, but you'll help the show out by doing that. So please support the show by means of Amazon. Also, please, if you've not already done so, go sign up for a free trial of Aura. Here is the website. You see the URL here at the top, www.aura.com/Hawkeyes. That's www.aura.com/Hawkeyes. I guess you can't see it on your screen, but this is the screen you want to pull up. So the link is in our description. If you type in www.aura.com/Hawkeyes, start your free trial and simply tell Aura that From the Hawkeye of the Storm sent you. That's an excellent way to support the cause here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Also, I've been promoting the Facebook page. We had, I think at one point, like over 600 people. We got about 400 people on now. But if you've not liked the Facebook page, please do that. I mean, I know we just passed 7,000 subscribers on the channel this week, Don. So we've got 7,000 subscribers here in the channel. We've got like 420 Facebook followers. That needs to improve. Please help us improve the Facebook page. Here is the Facebook page in case you haven't seen it. As you can see, the 426 followers. Please help us out with that. We've got so much content dropping there and alerts for content, and we're going to be adding more short-form content on social media and get alerted whenever we have a post-game show with Coach Patterson or Kasheen Alexander or Gary Close. Again, great stuff on the way. Like our page on Facebook. That's www.facebook.com/Hawkeye of the Storm. You can also click the link in our description. I just added it in there, and I'll throw it up here in. It's in our description. If you haven't done this, refresh the page. I added it in mid-show. Refresh the stream, or just type in facebook.com/Hawkeye of the Storm. Again, the news this week, the big news, according to multiple sources, former Western Michigan head coach Tim Lester and former Packers analyst Tim Lester has been hired as the Iowa offensive coordinator. He replaces longtime or 7-year offensive coordinator Brian Ferentz. Don, it's been a pleasure. Come back again soon. You're welcome back anytime, but the more off-season shows I get with you, the better. So appreciate you tuning in here, and I know you've made a lot of fans feel more encouraged, including myself. So appreciate you being here and your support of the show as always.
Tim deserves our support. Let's give him a chance and see what he can do.
Absolutely, folks. I will be back with you tomorrow, myself and Mark Rogers over on another channel, Iowa Football at the Voice of College Football on YouTube, 4:30 p.m. Central Time for that show. More content dropping right here on this channel. Be sure to tell your friends, like our page on Facebook, please. It does help immensely, and get your free trial of Aura at aura.com/Hawkeyes. Have a great night, folks. For Coach John Patterson, I'm Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We'll talk to you tomorrow.